I was requesting, I am going to switch on my laptop now, so probably you'll have to let me in again.
Yeah, no problem.
No problem. Yes, no problem. We'll let you in.
How long is this call? 1 hour? Huh?
1 hour, 45 minutes.
Okay, I'm having some stability issues with the video again. I've asked for a fancier connection. Apparently, 40 Mbps is not enough. So that'll take a couple of days. But if something happens, I'll go off video for a short while. Don't worry. I'm still there on the audio side.
Yeah. Don't worry. We can see you very clearly. You're looking as handsome as ever.
No, but it's saying unstable connection on my screen.
Yes. That is for all of us. That is the state of our networks in India, not only your office.
I've asked for a 100 Mbps connection now directly to the office network is getting overloaded. Anyway, what to do?
No, I think the 100 Mbps links are pretty stable these days. And
no, I want one just for myself. I'm right now using the office network.
You should.
A lot of people are doing Zoom call all around the office, so the connection is getting shaky.
So sorry to interrupt, but yeah, very nice to see you all here. So we are just going live in 5 seconds, and then we can start introductions, and then we can start the panel discussion. Thanks, Anand sir, and I think over to you.
Yeah, we can go live now.
Yes, we are live.
Good afternoon, everybody who was attending the conference IoTMatrix 2020. I hope you enjoyed all the morning sessions. We have been having a variety of sessions since 9 a.m. On 3 tracks. You had panel discussions and fireside chats covering technology and domain. So welcome to this session on smart green urban living. And this is going to be very interesting for each one of us, both as a career professional and as well as an individual citizen. And we have a very distinguished panel here with us today. And so without much ado, I will introduce the moderator of the panel, and he will then take over, and together with the panelists, I'm sure you will have a very absorbing and interesting and insightful session on smart green urban living. So this is T.R. Anand. I'm from the leadership team of the IoTMatrix and also on the governing board of TiE Bangalore. So to get started right away, to introduce Mr. Mustafa Wajid. Mustafa, you want to wave and say hello? Namaskara. So Mustafa Wajid is a fellow charter member of TiE Bangalore. He has a very distinguished career. He is the founder, CEO of Meher Energy Ventures, and he is also the leader of future mobility in IET. Mustafa has a very distinguished career, and just to give an example of the mentorship that he has provided to multiple companies, apart from leading his own company. All of you must have seen the Ather scooter on the advertisements in TV during recent days. So I understand that Mustafa played a very important role in mentoring the Ather team and also getting their manufacturing setup streamlined and getting off to speed. So we have a very good panel, and I'll now hand over to Mustafa, the moderator of this session, to continue.
Yeah, thank you, Anand sir, and welcome to everybody, and especially all the panelists who have joined us on this session. I'm an electrical engineer by profession and continue to be a practicing engineer. I also do a little bit of teaching on the side. Let me now begin by introducing our panelists. We have today with us, not in any particular order, but as I see them on screen, Mr. Sesha Sai, who is the Managing Director at Savills India, who comes from the real estate domain. He has been actively involved in the real estate sector in India for a couple of decades now, and has gone through various professional career positions in leading multinational real estate companies, and currently with Savills India. So his focus is built environment, which is a very important part of the smart urban green living that we are talking about today. So he will be contributing in that direction. We then have Mr. Naresh Narasimhan. I don't know whether to call him activist or architect first. He's a little bit of both. It depends on which time of the day you're talking to him. He and I go back a long way. We are batchmates for in the educational system, and he has had many firsts to his credit in India as an architect. He has, of course, I think one of the most recent things Mr. Anand sir mentioned was the kind of guidance and implementation that he oversaw of the renovation of Church Street or transformation of Church Street into a very different type of zone in Bangalore city. He's also been a very active participant in the urban planning process, not only of Bangalore, but of many other parts of India. And we would like to, of course, ask him to share his insights on urban planning particularly. Architecture is something that, of course, is his passion, but urban planning has become something on which he has become an expert. So having said that, we move to, I think, Dr. Giridhar Babu on the panel. You might have seen Dr. Giridhar Babu, all of us have seen him on the television in the recent period of the corona pandemic scenario. He's at a very senior level advising not only the state government, but various other statutory and government bodies on the management of COVID and the pandemic when it comes to the society at large, and particularly the urban society in particular. He's been part of the COVID task force and so on and so forth. So the health issue in smart urban green living is a horizontal. It applies in built environment, it applies in urban planning, it applies in mobility, and so on and so forth. So we will treat that as a horizontal, and he will have to share his insights on each of these aspects, which I'm sure he is more than capable of doing. We then have Mr. Anand Madan Gopal, again a brilliant technologist and innovator. He has dedicated his current activities towards a very interesting direction, and that is how to use connected technology to improve healthcare and management of health scenarios for citizens without going to the hospital. And I think that this is something that is very important going forward, that within the built environment, whether it's a residence or an office or wherever, how are we going to see the connected technology becoming usable to ensure that the average person's health can be better managed. Of course, it is very relevant for older people at home and small children at home and so on and so forth. But more about that when we talk about the connectivity and connected healthcare management within the built environment and within the urban ecosystem. These are the 4 key panelists that we have. I am moderating this session, but I will also be sharing some thoughts on mobility in the context of smart and urban green living. While we try and structure sessions in these kind
Mustafa, did you introduce Chirag?
Oh, I'm sorry. He seems to have gone off the screen. Chirag, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you see me?
Sorry, I can't see you. We have one important panelist from outside of India. And that is my colleague on the panel, Mr. Chirag Lakhani, who has joined us from Australia. He has been in the IT domain for the better part of his career, worked with companies like IBM and so on, and did his own startup a couple of years ago, and has done some really path-breaking work in helping the urban environments in Australia to better manage this whole concept of being smart and green. And there are some very interesting use cases that he has been the backbone of. And of course, we all recognize that Australia falls in the developed country zone, but I think there is a lot to be learned from what has happened there. And even though we may think today that it is a little futuristic or a little far away, I think we need to orient ourselves in those directions, because ultimately it improves the quality of life of people. And that, I think, is really an important achievement that we need to target in India going forward, not just in Bangalore, but all over the cities of India. How do we improve the quality of life by using both the digital transformation as well as the green transformation, and combine these two and see how to improve quality of life. So Chirag has some very interesting insights on that. My apologies to you, Chirag, for not introducing you and missing out. I was going by reading the panel members on the screen. So with that, we will begin the discussion. And I would suggest that we start with Chirag first, so that he can give us a perspective of what has actually happened in Australia. And that will give all of us, both in the panel and in the audience, a little bit of insight into comparing where we are approximately, because all of us experience things in our day-to-day life in India, and compare it with what we are hearing from Australia. I once again caution that it may be very futuristic, but there is a lot of learning potential out there. With that, over to you, Chirag.
Yeah. So in general, thank you, Mustafa, and thank you, Thai Bangalore, for inviting me on the panel. With this phenomenal change that's going through the green revolution, connected cities, connected homes, and all that, what has happened is this change come in play when people, like back in 2005, 2006, where everyone started using Googles of the world, the Facebooks of the world, and that expectation of the change of interaction has changed, and certainly the digital technology, the mobile phone, the penetration, that actually transformed the entire expectation of the individuals. And then that started putting in that mindset that, we need to change, we need to create something new. So when we started out working in this space, especially my area of expertise is working with the government agencies in doing the digital transformations. And they basically wanted to create that change. They wanted to match that expectation of how the end user was expecting from your daily lives of how they interact with all the private organizations and all the private banking and all that, and they were not seeing that happening with the government agencies when they interact with them. And that's where the whole digital transformation or smart city concept started kicking into the government agencies as well, that we need to bring it back and need to match that expectation. In matching that expectation, the first problem they had was they had a lot of information, a lot of data, the mountains of data. They were getting a lot of inputs from various devices out on the field and everything, but everything was just island of information. So they were not connected. So there was nothing can be seen as an actionable information. They were all just individual piles of data and no actionable information. So once we started working with them and then convert that information into meaningful, so interconnected those islands of information or data through a middleware technologies, without them needing to reinvest in the entire platform and the architecture from the start. And because obviously government agencies are always running short of funding. So we were able to leverage the existing systems and create this new, what you call a 360 view of the information they had. And in turn, we were able to convert all of that into meaningful and actionable information. Once we started doing that, then they're able to do a lot of meaningful information out of that. So one of the agencies that we work with, so they had a lot of rain gauges deployed out in the field. And they were collecting data from the rain gauges saying, how much rain was done and whatnot. But what we were able to do is take that information and convert that into, so what happens here in Australia, Saturday mornings are like a sports day. It's like a religiously followed thing. So every parents are taking their kids out to the field to play. They will have a cricket match, they'll have a soccer match, they will have a footy match, and every Saturday morning is a sports day. Now, if there is a lot of rain overnight, what happens is the field is closed. Now, you get there and you realize the field is closed. So what the council or agency was able to do is collect that rain gauge data and publish that information saying, this field is open or closed due to the rain gauge that has actually captured the information overnight. So before they start making the journey, they're able to actually get onto their phone and they're able to check. Now, this process, they already had all that information, but it's by connecting all the various information together and making that actionable, they were able to actually straight away deliver the meaningful, actionable information to the customer. On top of that, once we just sort of did the proof of concept, the next thing they did immediately after that is saying we got a lot of parkings around it. So we were able to collect that data, availability of the parking. So if you see if the park is open and you're going to that park, you immediately were able to go straight onto the parking space availability and check whether which parking area is open and not full, and possibly book a spot. So before you go there, so before you even step foot out of your house, you're able to know which field is open, which parking spot is available, and you can book it. So again, all of this information was there, but it was bringing all that information together and creating that actionable information for citizens. And that has won so much appreciation from the citizens in that area that, wow, the council is doing really well. So what we have been seeing is in Australia, all of that information is there, and then all the agencies wants to do lot of things, but they're not able to get to convert the information into the meaningful way so they can deliver those information out to the customers. Now, the scope of the customer has changed recently as well. So up until recently, what used to happen, customer is the residents living in the area or the people living in the area. That was the typical mentality. But with all this change, what has happened now, the definition of the customer has completely changed. So it's not only the residents that are living in the area, but it's the businesses that are asking for services, people visiting or commuting in the area, they're asking for the services. Other government agencies are asking for services and information, as well as the media, international agencies and whatnot. So the scope of their customer service has actually widened from just servicing the local resident to all the different entities. And in order for them to be able to provide that services, they had to do all these things. So those were the parameters that has actually kickstarted that process of interconnecting information, bringing the data together, make them meaningful. Once you're able to create that 360 view of the information they had, they were able to do a lot more, the mobility they were able to overlay, the cloud services, digital access, citizen self-service, citizen engagement, all of those aspects, they were able to actually service very easily, efficiently, and quickly. Mustafa?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Chirag. We'll come back to you, and I think that the crying need in India for services are somewhat different, and today there is a lack of connectivity or being able to bring this complete information together and get a 360-degree view. We will come back to that because I think it's also going to reflect in the urban planning part of the discussion, and how, because connected infrastructure, connected services, and connected citizens. These are the three dimensions of the whole IoT foundation. And our infrastructure in India, while some part of it has got connected, there is a whole lot of it which is not connected. And I could give you examples of things like street lighting, which is not really connected on one platform. I could give you examples of even sewage management, which unfortunately doesn't work very well sometimes in India, particularly when we have heavy rainfall. There have been areas in Bangalore where the water supply and the sewage lines, sometimes there is a kind of mixing happening for a variety of complex reasons. So the sensors for this are not in place. And it's quite common in Bangalore during some parts of the year where this happens, and people stop using municipal supply water and start buying water from the private tankers. So these are some of the challenges that we will discuss. There are, of course, many, and it's quite diverse. Having said this, before we move to the built environment, I think since we have started from the top-down approach of what the governance authorities and the municipal authorities can probably look at and how governance can be made more connected, I would like to invite Naresh to now give his perspective on urban planning and how do we talk about sustainability. Because one of the things that we see in Indian cities is that we are still using roads that were built about 70, 80 years ago. They used to be two ways, they have become one ways, for example. There are traffic jams now. Sometimes you wonder why they built such wide roads 70 years ago. Some of the roads in Bangalore, because when we grew up here, the traffic was not even 5% of what it is today, but the roads were still the same. So obviously there is a deficit between what the urban planning capability needs to deliver on the ground and what is actually happening. It's also because of the fact that the rate of change is very high. And the delta between the rate of change and the rate of reaction to providing that infrastructure upgrade or modification, there is a time lag. And this has created all kinds of distortions in the system. But Naresh knows a lot more about that. And how do we move forward with this backdrop of a skewed situation that we are today in? The fact of the matter is that even in mobility, it takes about 3 to 4 times the amount of time to travel between A and B than what it used to take for the same time, same distance 15 years ago. So are we saying that 15 years from now, it will be 10 times more or 15 times more? I don't know. So with that backdrop, over to you, Naresh, to give a perspective on urban planning and sustainability.
Yeah, okay. We've inherited a poor legacy, I grant you that. But coming to today's particular topic, the use of IoT devices and the use of technology can actually make us do a quantum jump from the problem that we are facing today. This problem has come to us, as you pointed out, as a result of various things. Perhaps one of the greatest things is the inability to respond to rapid change. The, what do you call it, the siloed nature which Chirag pointed out of government systems or government agencies or multiple parastatals, as we call them, who manage the city, who don't talk to each other, but have a ton of data silos built up in there, which don't talk to each other. But if we start defining what we want in terms of outcomes, in India, they never define outcomes. They only define projects. You know, and sometimes, if you are lucky, we even get a process. But from a political point of view and from a administrative point of view, you never see a discussion on what is a desirable outcome or what is a metric against which a project can be measured or a big planning change can be measured. Planning is still in India is stuck in the land use era. They color different parts of the city, different colors, and release a plan which everybody proceeds to violate almost immediately. Right? So planning is now today all about mobility. And when you say mobility, it becomes a very big word because it also means other things other than just moving around. So what I would like to redefine mobility is probably say we all need transportation, but we all don't want traffic. So how do you reconcile the two issues? Then when efficient transportation and transit becomes the key to living in a city, but nobody likes traffic. The answer is not widening roads. The answer is not creating more and more flyovers. The answer is not building even more infrastructure for cars than already and for private vehicles than already is there. With the COVID, that this whole idea towards public transit has taken a bit of a backseat. But with the vaccine on from next month, hopefully in a year from now, we can see some resumption of normalcy. But the problem is it has to become the new normal. If you go back to business as usual, and we would have wasted this COVID emergency for the opportunity it gave us. Today in Bangalore itself, the amount of startups creating, video-enabled traffic sensors, parking sensors, all the technology we want is available, and all the data we want is also available. So we have to find a way to make government agencies start talking to each other by forcing them onto that's what the private sector can help to do. Beyond that, forcing them onto a single platform in which the data set is normalized across all stakeholders within a city. For instance, traffic alone and mobility alone, if you look at the environment in Bangalore, you will find that there is a bus corporation, there is a traffic police, there is a city municipal corporation, there is a development authority, there is all kinds of other, like there is departments who register motor vehicles, there are guys who regulate them. So this is like one nightmare of cross-jurisdictional problems. So it's more a governance issue than a technology issue. The technology is already available to do it. Two, you already see this being implemented in the private sector. For instance, I am working on a parking garage right now. For the parking garage eventually will hold 3,500 cars. It's a huge parking garage by any standard. But earlier, what used to happen is people go into a garage and they'll keep aimlessly driving around and till they find parking. And they do that on the road also. When people have to park, they keep going around in circles. Like Chirag pointed out today, in this new project, now we have now just completely, what do you call it? We have now done a completely new system in which, let me just read that. It's a, what it does is the moment you come into park, you are assigned a drone. The drone will fly in front of you and take you to the exact parking spot that is available. Something as simple, it sounds like a simple thing, but it saves like approximately 15 to 20 minutes of idle driving. And so you can reduce congestion by that. B, a big focus on electric and hydrogen mobility in public transportation is required now. And that already there are a lot of national missions and all that to do it. But more and more and more, we have to learn to take all trips beyond 2 to 3 kilometers only in public transit. And there must be private transit options available at both ends so that the last mile does not become a problem. From generally, if you talk about planning, it's also an issue about the environment, right? So nowadays, we are starting to find that whether it is smarter farming or monitoring the health of public infrastructure, or even, for instance, even saving urban wildlife, using technology and IoT technologies particularly for tracking, for making sure that wildlife is protected, green areas are protected, and there is surveillance of critical areas so that encroachment doesn't happen. All this is becoming part of planning. Last but not the least, with LiDAR-based drone survey capabilities, we are now able to get a wealth of topographical data, which we were only dependent upon satellites till now. Now the resolution has come down to, I think, less than 15 centimeter in urban areas. And then with 15 centimeter, literally I can spot somebody doing something he shouldn't be doing. So that level of detail is available. The new Bangalore master plan is now going to leverage all these technologies, and I'm working with the government now to create what is called a digital twin of the entire city in total detail, so that there's no question of people evading property taxes. There's no any GIS layer can be put onto it. All utilities will be mapped above ground and underground, so that the city has a digital twin of itself in cyberspace. So I'll stop here.
Yeah, thank you, Naresh. Maybe we'll come back to you on another important issue, and that is smart urban and green living. I think the green part also needs to be focused a little bit more by you, but we'll come back to that. We have a shortage of green areas in the city. How are we going to ensure that that green comes back to what you and I have grown up in Bangalore, where bulk of Bangalore was green at that time?
Yeah.
We had so many options of
We're doing a couple of projects in that area. I'll talk about it after the others have had a chance.
Sure. So I think we've heard it from top down, from very different viewpoints, an Australian viewpoint, an Indian viewpoint with a little emphasis on Bangalore, which Naresh has given. At the same time, we need to ensure that whatever is being done in the built environment, and this includes all types of buildings. It could be residential, commercial, hospitality, offices, etc., etc. It could also include industrial buildings, because significant parts of the urban agglomeration in most Indian cities have industrial estates within them today, because the city has outgrown them. In Bangalore, for example, Pina was considered outside of Bangalore, but now Bangalore extends beyond Pina. And Pina, the industrial area, has become an integral part of the Bangalore city itself. This has happened in many cities all over. I just gave one example as a sort of a suggestion to keep that in mind. The reality of built environment, therefore, is going to be a lot more complicated going forward if we are to make it smart and green. And we'd like to have a perspective on this from Mr. Seshasai with his experience and what he has been seeing, how this space has evolved across the couple of decades in India, and how do we see the whole thing going forward, and how do we use connected technologies to make the built environment both smart and green. I think that's a point that I'd like Sesha to address. With that, over to you, Sesha.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mustafa. Right, yeah. The buildings are various types, like what we call, we use buildings for working, work, live, and play. You can categorize into, broadly these three. And the main purpose of the buildings are essentially for the people who use their health and wellness, provide productive places. Now the third dimension of sustainability has also come in with the amount of natural resources and energy that this built environment has been using. Almost like 40% of the energy is used, and even greenhouse gases are emitted by the built environment actually. So there is a lot of potential and need actually to intervene at the building level, at a structures level. So what's happening is most of the time we are replicating the Western style of architecture, and we are building a lot of commercial buildings with glass, and then trying to cool them. And so starting with that kind of a sensitivity about the how do we build the buildings which are more suitable to our local climate conditions, and how do we bring in more of a nature into the buildings. Today, if you see, we have become more of a concrete jungles in our cities. So we are creating a lot of heat islands. So all these are actually known problems in the built environment industry. But essentially, either because of the lack of knowledge from the end users and investors that are helping to build these structures, and also people who are not demanding for the sustainability, because there is a still very little awareness about the damage that these buildings are causing, because you are using a lot of resources to build them. Then we again take a lot of energy to maintain those buildings. Because the energy and resources are not necessarily only in running cost. When you import the products from outside long distances, they carry a lot of carbon footprint, and they are also energy intensive to produce. So there are so many secondary and tertiary impacts of the way that buildings are done. So I think as a India, we are still at the very, I would say, early stage of our urban developments relative to the many other countries, whether you take a Westerns or China, Europe. So I think our cities are about 30% of the population currently, 25 to 30%, and we are expected to go to about 50 to 60% of the urbanization in the next 30 years. So we are almost going to develop our urban infrastructure, built environment in the next 30 years. So we have a lot of opportunity and need for actually creating a sustainable infrastructure and buildings. And taking that, extrapolating that into what even Chirag mentioned about the islands of data. Buildings used to be 15, 20 years back, they used to be static structures. The services we had was water and electricity, and even the telephone at the best. So now we have internet into the buildings, but now the buildings are becoming a more living systems. That means you should be able to actually ping into the building and see what is the carbon dioxide CO2 levels in these. Are we getting enough fresh air into that? What is the density of the occupancy? And how much energy are we using for cooling and other uses? And how much is the parking occupied? So you can actually, the buildings can generate a lot of data. So earlier, even data was not generated. So there were very few sensors into the buildings, except those essential. And even those were very locked into proprietary protocol systems. So with awareness of IoT, what it can do, and what I call as a data democratization happening in other industries, even the building industry is catching up with this. How can I create data and how I can give the data to wider audience? Because what we need is an ecosystem where part one data is created and part two, we identify what problems can I solve provided I have this data. So use cases, and it should not be limited to the people who either help creating the data or the people who are actually owners of the data. So that is where we are seeing an open architecture in terms of APIs being developed. So if I know that if I'm getting the air conditioning load, ambient temperature, number of people, and CO2 levels, can I correlate these things and benchmark them across the buildings on that street in this town compared to similar towns of the similar ecosystems? And how do you help you actually benchmark these particular buildings with other buildings? And that is where we can drive the efficiencies. So these possibilities are there now. And fortunately now we got sensors which are multi-sensors into one single unit. So you can measure temperature, humidity, VOC, CO2. VOC stands for volatile organic compounds. Those are the fumes that generated by your phenols. So a lot of data can be picked up by one or two sensors actually. So we are getting into a stage where you can easily create data. Now we need to find ways and means how this data can be exploited to provide a meaningful, actionable intelligence that we were speaking about. So we need these buildings to open up and tell them, I have this data. If you have any ways to solve this problem or use this data, come and do it. You don't have to necessarily share the data. And that is where, like Naresh mentioned, whether you get a drone or I enter into the building, I am allotted a parking slot and my mobile shows actually which way I should go and park myself. Till then, that slot is reserved for me next 5-10 minutes. Or this could be meeting rooms. It could be no-touch visitor entry into the offices. You are pre-qualified and you can actually get into the meeting, into the buildings as a visitor. And so there are so many other ways that we can efficiently create, not only in the commercial establishments, in other scenarios, whether it is retail, restaurants, playgrounds, even in the homes. So there is immense opportunities to create both optimization and productivity, and also bring in natural resources conservation, power and water, all those. So I think the conversation that is happening inter-industry between the technology and material sciences and urban infrastructure, built environment professionals is going to help us to reach this.
Yeah, thank you for that insight, Sesha. What we are saying is that this word smart building used to mean something else a few years ago. Essentially, from what I can understand from what you're saying is that we need to go beyond smart and make the building like a sentient kind of entity, which is alive in quote inverted commas. And alive would mean that there would have to be bidirectional flow of data, interventions that can happen in real time, either by manual supervision or by automated systems, because having vast amounts of data enables also application of machine learning and some degree of artificial intelligence to be applied. Computing power is no longer a scarce resource. This has changed dramatically in the last few years. So making a building sentient, or maybe to drop the word smart and say sentient buildings, that's essentially what you seem to be pushing towards, actually. Would I be correct in saying that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so the IoT obviously will form the base foundation layer if a building has to become sentient. That's one key issue that is very clearly thing, and we'll come back to that issue. While we always focus on resources and energy, I think one of the big elephant in the room as far as we are concerned in India is water. And if we go on at this rate of urbanization and do not do some very hard work on conservation and management of water, we might all be drinking again mineral water like many people in many cities do by buying bottles from the shop. So that's something that we would not like to see. I still come from a generation which drinks tap water in Bangalore, and I still do it. I mean, and I haven't fallen sick. So therefore, I think that flexibility needs to continue, and we can't have water issues coming up. But that's a horizontal. Again, we'll come back to that. Thank you for that insight. And now we will move to another area which has consumed a lot of our mental time in the past few months. Thanks to this COVID or unfortunate event of COVID pandemic, even people who are sick have not been able to go to hospital. If we want a smart, urban, green living environment, healthcare for the individual is at the heart of the whole issue. And thanks to this COVID, they have not been able to, many people have not been able to go and get treated in hospitals because they are not getting admitted. So many sort of things are being done on the telephone, some approximation, ad hocism, etc., etc. So this is a very troublesome sign. We also know that some people have lost their lives because of lack of medical attention, because they could not go to a hospital in time. I have had cases where I had lost a friend of mine who had a heart problem, was driven to the emergency of a very large hospital, but they refused to take because there was no COVID certification of he was negative. So by the time they did all that paraphernalia, his condition worsened. And this is something that is going to be a very dangerous issue. And our next panelist, Mr. Anand Madan Gopal, comes from that direction. He is working on enabling people to get better treatment at home without going to hospital. Of course, this does not mean that hospitals will get eliminated or get reduced in their importance, but I think that there will be a lot of relief for a variety of ailments if we can get treated at home by using the IoT, digital health, and the platforms with the medical community coming together on board. So with this, I would move to Mr. Anand Madan Gopal to give his insight on how do we as citizens living in built environments or working in built environments can leverage this whole or make use of this whole IoT technology and the other layers that come with it, whether it is data platforms, ML, AI, etc., and the medical community, to ensure that we remain reasonably healthy for such of those ailments which don't require us to go to hospitals urgently. Over to you, Anand.
Thank you, Mustafa. So I'll just take a step back and explain to you where all this is coming from. Obviously, the COVID scenario has accelerated many such things to happen. As Naresh pointed out earlier, you have to use this opportunity actually to change ways of doing things. So that is the silver lining in the COVID scenario that has happened. So it is not just homes. So let's take just hospitals, for instance. So hospitals also work in extremes. So you have the normal wards. Okay, you're almost ready to, things are now fairly normal and you're ready to go home. And you're very sick. You have the ICUs where you're taken in because you're critically ill. Your life is in danger. You need to be monitored 24/7. From here to the ward, there's a big gap. So even in the hospital, when you're off this ICU from a general, you're not in so critical, to, are you ready to go home? No, there's a big gap there. Now, even here, what they do in hospitals is data and management of the patient is actually manual. The nurses take care of this. They come with various gadgets, collect data, put it in. And if a certain data set is going off, she's supposed to warn the consultant or the doctors at play. So something like an early warning score. So it's called the Muse score and things like that. Different terminologies exist across hospitals. Now, even here, we're talking about connected scenarios where you don't need to do this because you're relying on manual data collection, which could be erroneous. For no reasons of the people involved, you could still have bad data. The other problem is where people are not doing diligent jobs, they're just fudging data, which means you get into more severe cases. I've had so many consultants say, the data that goes into the sheets, we do not know if it were really collected. So you see, there's a plethora of problems. So what we've done is, as a company, we've actually produced platform and devices that automate this process. So the data collection is actually simply by a device that's on the patient that actually picks up his vitals. Vitals are the cornerstone of every part of health management. or disease management, which we include the ECG as well. So something happens automatically, you have a trend, and you also have alerts raising if something's going wrong, because the devices work with algorithms along with system to raise their approximate alert. Now let's just take to urban planning with this perspective. If we take this to homes, when I say homes, I'm not expecting every individual to buy the device. That's not going to happen. And in the near future, it's not an affordable scenario at all. Now you have communities like the Shah was saying, you have a living environment. There's a small aspect of the living environment could be the first hub to anybody getting sick within the environment without the stigma of doing something like the way COVID has got us. If somebody gets sick there, cornered out. Say you stay away. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a system where somebody says somebody's sick. Let me see what the scenario is. Can I connect them to the right places, which will actually see that these people need to go to a hospital? Everybody has this doubt. Landing about a hospital, getting say, I must get the best so that I'll get myself admitted. It actually is no win scenario because one, you're losing out on critical infrastructure for somebody who doesn't need it. Second, you're losing out money. Well, the hospital might like it, but it's not an overall better scenario because you're actually unnecessarily staying there. Suppose you got monitoring. Suppose you got the right set of tests done. You could very well stay at home for a large set of diseases that are managed. COVID just taught us that very well. First, there was a rush to find the hospital. Then they said, unless you're really sick, you don't come in. How do you know that? So this is where I'm in quote even cases like dengue, few other things that are happening in our communities where we live. Big monitors were brought home. Occasionally the nurse would come in, do things and go back. And the person stayed at home for 14 days because they're cleared and everything is okay. Now we're seeing the new norms of these. Suppose we had devices which are not very complicated, but can do ICU level monitoring and is connected. And there is a body that actually looks at multiple patients and says, following are getting critical. The mu scores are going back. Can I raise an alert so that some other body pitches in and says, hey, we will get an intensivist, we'll get a consultant to look at it, talk to the patient needs to come home. Now this can be enabled. These bodies that I talk about are the new norms that are happening. There are people providing this service. There are large communities, 400 homes, 500, or even 100 home community can have its own setup. All they need is one device set up there, depending on how mix and match the usages. And SaaS models are coming all over the place. So you don't need to always buy all sorts of equipment. You have a scenario where these bodies will provide the first level care and the second level care comes in when things get critical. This way, the infrastructure is better utilized. Now, this is not just about it. Now I'm talking about general homes for people. Now, what about geriatric care? People for old age people. There are communities now coming up with scenarios. Again, very simple devices can actually go in and do this. When I say simple devices, one of the biggest requirement is, it is not the sensors. Sensors have always been there. It is the complexity of usability of the device that makes it difficult, which is why you need the nursing community. You need the technician community. Suppose it is made simple enough such an average user can use it, bang. You've got the setup going for a smaller home, a smaller set of people who can actually use it. And the people back end connected can actually provide the first level care. And the number of ambulances going on the road will reduce because you've started treatment of the patient or looking at the patient far earlier. What Mustafa was pointing out, I push the meter closer to the critical end than I need to rush. Symptoms are there earlier. If it becomes a non-stigma, hey, I am having slight symptoms. Can somebody in my community take a look at me? I have the devices, very simple. We have one such device. You just place it on your chest and put a Velcro belt. It actually tells you all the vitals, look at your ECG, says something is going wrong or not. Can I get a consultant to look at you right away? It's just all connected right away. Now you see how easy it is. Early symptoms need not be waited to see if it's a real symptom late. You can actually clear off, for which this is not a heavy fee because you're not pulling the big consultants in because they're costly. You're using simpler techniques and simpler setup to actually get the first level diagnostics. If we can do this and then connect up the hospitals, then I think we're going in for an urban scenario that's better managed for health and disease management. Thank you, Mustafa.
Thank you, Anand, for that insight. A couple of things here is that, do you foresee a scenario where there will be an intermediate layer of startups between the citizen and the healthcare community, which can facilitate this whole process?
Actually, they're already springing up. There are quite a few startups, but they're trying to go to critical end care. Now, slowly they'll realize there's a bigger space where they can actually manage multiple set of patients who are not fully critical, and that becomes a business model for a small fee. The economics of scale is very important in this, because you're not bringing the consultant all the way to different places. They can sit wherever they are and do this. It's a form of telemedicine, but a very different proposition. I can see a few startups already going. I think this will grow.
Yeah, could you just throw a little bit of light on wearables? Because societal acceptance of this kind of technology, if it has to become ubiquitous, wearables have a very critical role to play. For example, though it's a very expensive product, the new Apple Watch claims that it can measure your oxygen level, it can do an ECG to detect arrhythmia in your heart and so on and so forth. So are we seeing a situation where, as part of this smart urban living or smart living in general, we are going to see wearables becoming more equipped and at much lower cost than where they are today?
Yes, absolutely. But there is a small problem here, Mustafa, which is one of the most critical issues here. The more lifestyle you get, dependability of the data from the device becomes questionable. Okay, there are some gold standards of how a vital is picked up. Now, somewhere along the line, you need to see devices which are cost effective, like you mentioned, but they need to be reliable. Only then you can look at a wearable becoming a healthcare extension of a hospital. So this is where we are also trying to operate. And the wearable second part, the wearable should be easy to use and wear. So which is where Apple's grows very big, because you're just putting it like a watch. Put your hand onto the crown and you get your ECG. Very good. Very similar. Can we do low-cost devices? Apple Watch is about ₹1,00,000. We're now looking at hardly any set of population really using it. So you need to do far cheaper devices, but that can do a full segment as well. So there are devices which we do. For instance, you have your respiration rate, you have your oxygen parameters, your body temperature, and your ECG, fully analyzed with your pulse rate and says what is going on. Now that those devices are already in existence today. We also have some in our portfolio as well, which we're taking to market. And these will become the norm for these new bodies to provide the first level care. And that is something that is going to happen very shortly.
Yeah, so this sounds like an opportunity for a lot of bright young engineers because this domain obviously requires some very serious ground up hardware engineering. And this is, I would probably see it as something which has to be designed for Indian conditions by Indians for India. And while we may leverage half a dozen manufacturing countries to get that hardware manufactured because of a variety of reasons of cost and so on, but that's a huge opportunity, and this clearly is a trend where it has a value for the citizen, it has a value for the medical community, and there is a new layer of interlayer which can come up. Just like how in e-commerce today you see many services being made available, this could also become another large service which is consumer oriented in that sense and provide a great relief for healthcare management at the citizen level.
I would like to point out here, Mustafa, the device that we've been making is completely manufactured in India. We do it out of this facility here. And this is an ICU class device, which is very simple to wear across the chest, gives you all the 5 parameters. So it's already happening. We don't have to go overseas to get this done. What is really lacking is still the sensors which come from abroad. So some of the sensors are only made by some of these IC manufacturers, but everything else, including the algorithms and the platform, is already happening here today. And this is what we've taken to many hospitals, and we're moving into providers which can actually take it to home.
Yeah, so I see a great scope for interaction between Indian manufacturing industry and this sector. We have to go Atmanirbhar, as the new terminology suggests. It's, in English, we used to call it self-reliance earlier. So that's something that is obviously a huge opportunity. I'm sure that the TIE would be a good platform to sort of accelerate efforts in this direction. Thank you for that, Anand. Very insightful and very thought-provoking sort of feedback from your side or views from your side. Having heard all of these people, we now come to Dr. Giridhar Babu to sort of give us a macro perspective of how we are looking at this whole public health issue in an urban environment. Since this discussion is focused on urban, it's not that we don't want to discuss rural, but we want to give an emphasis here on the urban because today's session is focused around that. And therefore, I'd request Dr. Giridhar Babu to come in and give us a wider perspective of how the whole public health scenario will play out in this whole concept of smart and green urban living. Dr. Babu, are you there?
Yes. Thanks,
Yeah,
Mr.
over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. So let me begin from health and then I'll speak of illness, because both are mostly confused, both by the kind of client base and also the provider base. We define health as not merely absence of disease, but complete physical, social, and mental well-being. In order to do that, let me give you a personal experience. When I go to London, you buy one card from where you can go into any kind of transport and then ensure that you reach your destination. And this is the point earlier one of the experts on the panel was alluding to. When I have to travel from point A to point B, the transport for London gives me options. If you go by bus, how much time it takes. If you take a car, how much time it takes, and also the money that I need to find. And then they suggest it's better you walk because you'll reach in 4 minutes. And this kind of messaging is coming from the public authority. Now let's bring that into the perspective in terms of India. Whatever the expertise limited that I have in terms of urban living and the way built environment is around, it is definitely not conducive for health. You are really scared to cross road when you want to walk, and would you let your children to go for walking when such safety hazard is there? And whether it is safe for women to walk or do physical activity. So therefore we have to contextualize the learnings from all over the world in terms of how do you promote healthy living in an urban ecosystem. In order to do that, it's not simply widening the roads. One of the problems Bangalore is facing every year is flood-like situations. And every time you would listen to the same story saying that one canal gets blocked and we don't seem to be doing anything. And this is definitely an engineering solution, which is mixed with politics and other kind of implementation failures. So now moving forward, we can't simply do cosmetic changes externally unless these kind of inherent changes are altered in the built environment. And that has to happen from the government side, which allocates land for building, how much space for walking, how much space for roads, and how much is for footpath. All this has to be regulated, and whatever has happened as a mistake earlier, this has to change, and the kind of new planning that has to come has to be very methodical. But I don't see that is happening. There is sort of blanket approvals being given for construction everywhere, green zones being converted into built zones with no actual plan in terms of how urban living can be made more healthier. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think there is a case mostly for technology and for the experts in the built environment to advocate, with a lot of passion, saying that money or profit can be made anyhow, but then can we integrate these principles into the kind of business models that we run so that everybody gains in the end? So that is from the health part of sickness. If you look at the way an ambulance gets shifted, it becomes a news story if the ambulance reaches in time. And this has to change, and that can also happen. And I am very happy to listen to all the experts here. They've brought in such passionate work into built environment and the ecosystem around it. But there's a lot that needs to be done. But I would not put all the onus only on the government or on the industry. The public also have equal role to play. If I don't want to walk, no matter of a footpath or the green space that is created, I will not use it. I might want to buy more cars. So that will change from illness point of view, because most of the non-communicable diseases are lifestyle problems. And in order to change the lifestyle, already cancer incidence is increasing and people are speaking of making lifestyle changes. And once this advocacy sets in of making the lifestyle changes, then the ecosystem also appeals to them. So it's a balanced approach where all the stakeholders are involved. It's not easy. Only when you go outside or see elsewhere, you find that, okay, the system is fantastic. But when you come back, we don't know from where to begin. And thanks to some of the people who are doing brilliant work, Anand, Mr. Seshagi, and Mr. Naresh, and wonderful inputs by Mr. Chirag. But we have to have a concerted effort, a coordinated effort. Earlier, there used to be Bangalore Agenda Task Force, which used to do some of these things. But now you all fight your own battles. And after this panel discussion is over, I don't think anybody would help anyone, and people become busy with their own lives. And then maybe a year around, we will be discussing the same issue, like how the flood-like situation occurs in rain. I'm not pessimistic, but then unless you create a platform where these coordinated efforts occur and sustain, I don't think we can solve easily, or not even begin easily.
Dr. Babu, that was very interesting insight about healthy living and the urban ecosystem. And I think that was a very pragmatic point of view. I wouldn't call you a pessimist. I think you're being very pragmatic on the whole thing. But I would like you to just share with all of us, how do you see this whole COVID and health management in an urban situation going forward? Now that we have some vaccine issues coming up, and looks like 2021 will be the year of the vaccination, so to speak. Can you please enlighten the audience and us on how you see the COVID pandemic being managed going forward?
I think COVID-19, despite of all the sadness, despair, depression that induced in the communities, we also got to see the kind of collaborations that were forged during the pandemic phase. Many volunteers doing a lot of work in terms of using their skills in technology and their voluntary help in terms of, let's say, giving food to migrants and all that. But what I see is the government will manage, at least from where we are speaking, we are in a better state and the better city in terms of seeking the advice of experts and then getting the actions done and ramping up the testing. Despite of all the state of economy that the governments are in, it's a mammoth exercise that testing levels are increased, and we will be out of this soon. But let's not pin all of our hopes only on vaccines, because till date, a safe and effective vaccine is not available in India. It is available in US and UK. Those vaccines have tested the trial results and then they are yet to be proved. But we have not seen those kind of results for the indigenous vaccine. That doesn't mean that it is again, it's not a note of despair. We need to wait till the results are available. And then for Indian conditions of, using your refrigerator, like, temperature settings of delivering the vaccine logistics, then it will be fine. So we just need to wait it out. But even when vaccines are available, we need to continue the precautions in terms of physical distancing and mask. But beyond COVID, there are collaborations that are developed during COVID, and if they can only be sustained, if the government's response in terms of COVID-19 can be scaled up for healthy living in not just urban areas, but healthy living as the focus, and continue with all the experts and the stakeholders, I think there is a way to be very optimistic about future. But COVID-19 will go, we will come out of this. But if there is another pandemic around, it is the same flood-like situation. We are reactive when there is a crisis, and then we go into our own areas of busy activities.
Can you also just quickly share, sir, your experience with the IoT connectivity and technology layers, and how do you see them playing an important role in this whole pandemic activity going forward? Because some normalcy will resume, but at the same time, there is this overhanging apprehension that it may not be completely eradicated for some more time. So how do we use technology and connected technology to sort of manage this situation and try to get as close to normalcy as possible?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't think the technological solutions should be a stopgap measure only for this pandemic. This should actually be strengthening the surveillance efforts of the diseases so that it will sustain for longer time. If you are aware, Karnataka used technology to do quarantine, to ensure testing is done, to ensure that most of the people are tracked in time. This is the time for us to make use of those sustained use of technologies for disease surveillance and integrating with the existing programs. Just to give you an example, more than 10 programs have independent surveillance programs. We need an integrated dashboard that collects. The worker is the same person who is collecting the details for 10 vertical programs. Something as simple as this for a health worker in the rural or peripheral urban areas. That's one. Two, most people can use technology and then update their details, at least in urban areas. There you don't require a lot of health workforce. So we need to empower people to make use of, instead of 100 and no, the last count we had was more than 240 apps are used by the health department, and each one speaks in its own language. So we should have an integrated platform, make sure that it is useful for people, and then ensure that the actual goals of disease control are taken care. So there is a tremendous scope for technology. I don't think we have used even 1% of its potential.
Thank you, Dr. Babu. That was very insightful, and I think all of us will go back and sleep a little more comfortably now that you have said that we will come through this without too much of problem. So right now, I can assure you that many of the panelists as well as the audience are sitting at home and attending this event, as opposed to
the worst is over as long as we continue the same kind of precautions.
Yeah, which takes me back to Chirag, and you heard Dr. Babu and Dr. who has highlighted that there are multiple verticals, multiple surveillance programs. The authorities have all the data, but again, it comes back to what the point you raised about the 360-degree viewpoint. So this obviously opens up possibilities for startups to play a role, because at one end, the consumer is involved or the citizen is involved. And at the other end, you have the infrastructure, the digital or the medical infrastructure working on it. Has something like this been done in Australia, which you've been involved in, which you would like to share some thoughts on, Chirag?
Yes. So with the COVID, I'll take an example from the COVID thing. So one of the first things the Australian government did was they created an app called COVID Safe app. They requested all the citizens to use that app. Obviously, you know, the standard isolation, staying at home, working from home, all of that was encouraged. People were staying and doing all of those, as well as there was an app. So what that app did is, it, even if you go out, and it actually tracked where have you been. So when the contact tracers were actually working through, so if they identify that somebody has tested positive, and if that person is using the app, and if you have come anywhere near that person and you're using the app as well, so the contact tracer would immediately know, and they would notify me as well, saying, Chirag, you have been in this area around this person at this time in the shopping center or wherever, please isolate for 14 days. On top of that, the government then are able to enforce the isolation. So, you know, that those type of response had allowed such a really good management of the COVID, that like we are in what 46th, 47th day today without not a single new case in Sydney. Melbourne is on, I think, 36th day of no new case. So life over here in Australia has actually gone back to normal. We're not having any locally acquired cases at all. The only cases that has been happening in recent days are people returning from overseas, and they are kept in the isolation. And those are the only cases happening. So again, you know, as Mr. Giridhar mentioned, there is a lot that can be achieved through the use of technology, especially with the communicable diseases, and having the what do you call the government's swiftness to move and adapt to those changes.
Yeah, Chirag, I would encourage you to connect with Dr. Giridhar Babu separately and maybe consider evaluating, trying to do a pilot on let's say the surveillance aspect of communicable diseases. I see COVID as a subset of that. I think while we are today paying a lot of importance to COVID, there are many other problems as well that need to be addressed.
Yep, sure.
So I think the TIE can facilitate this interaction, and possibly there could be startups that can be built with business models in this space, which will involve citizen consumers at one level, the medical fraternity and the authorities at another level. Of course, the elephant in the room is about privacy and in security of data. Many people are worried about that, and that's a matter, it's a discussion for another day. I don't want to sidetrack the discussion into the cyber security and privacy issues. Let's come back to both Mr. Naresh Narasimhan and Mr. Seshasai. How do you see, and I'd like you to go, Sesha, first on this whole issue of water, because when we say smart and green urban living, water is really a very important part of this, often underestimated, often underplanned, and then all kinds of knee-jerk reactions, ad hoc reactions happen. So how do you see this water management conservation issue going forward in a built environment from your point of view, Sesha?
Yeah, as they say that in future wars will be fought on water, not on oil anymore. So at this point, actually, there is no unified approach. Unfortunately, water is flowing into the sea when it is raining, and we are clamoring for water. We are transporting water by trains and trucks, actually, when it is required. So I believe that when we do a proper rainwater harvesting and proper treatment of the water inside, there are very few examples, but good examples of net zero buildings, what we call. Not only energy, but resources, they are recycled, not a drop is wasted, and they are able to use. And what we have seen is, even in the residential buildings, when we are able to install proper sewage treatment plants, we are able to generate surplus treated water that can be used for gardening and plants, even for the public areas. So there is a huge opportunity actually for us, not only on minimizing the water through right fixtures and fittings, but actually recycling the water. Okay, and that is very important. And second, how do we even construct the buildings that will use less cooling, thereby we use less water in chiller plants and all that. Okay, and also capture the water when it rains through right type of landscaping and system. So there is a lot of areas that we could work, and for that, the problem what we are facing is we don't have a right benchmarks. What is the standard that I can aspire for, and what is the problem I'm staring? If we are able to create this kind of a data, capture the data to water consumption levels. If this A building is using 130 liters per person per day, and a B building is doing at 100 liters a day, then there is a competition, there is a benchmark. At this point, both this data is not captured and also not publicized. I think there is a huge opportunity for us to work on creating this kind of a environment where the building engineers, operators, facility managers can both create the data and see that, and then create opportunities for saving the water and recycling the water. So that's still a lot unexplored area for now.
Yeah, so the role of IoT and the technology in I would say what the three things that you mentioned: optimization of consumption, recycling, and benchmarking. I think the technology that is today available is ready for use, but for some reason it's not actually being deployed, and sort of outcomes are not being achieved out of using these three levers of optimization, recycling, and benchmarking. That's something that I think you guys from the built environment sector need to push. and maybe even ask the government to sort of bring out some sort of guideline, regulations, incentivization, or whatever it is.
I don't know. Sorry. 2 points there. One, government has done enough legislations and created whatever they can do, incentives to water harvesting and all that. It is the citizen who have to realize that water is not an infinite resource, because everyday tap water is coming through the tap. It's not coming infinite. And two, there are, as you said, easy and simple solutions available, especially for residential apartments, where you can meter the water. Now there are devices available where you can see my apartment, how much water did I use in a day. I can see from my app by putting those measurable, the water meters which can communicate to the cloud. But since it is not still hitting the citizen about the scale of problem, there is a lot of, unfortunately, insensitivity towards investing in these kind of systems.
So creating awareness, you feel, is one of the things which is lacking.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Having said that, thanks for that very useful pointers, Shesha. Thanks for that. I now go to Naresh to give his perspective on how is the future of water management, and how do we use the IoT technology and coupled with other layers of technology to ensure that this whole thing is optimized, recycling and this business of incentivization or awareness is strengthened going forward, because otherwise I'm afraid that in a few years from now in urban India, we will be facing very different scenarios on water supply. Over to you, Naresh.
Okay, let me just widen the conversation at this point and not just focus on urban water supply. See, the problem with water in India, particularly the way we talk about it, is we don't have a single metric to talk about water. Water flows into a dam in cusecs. It is stored in a dam in 1,000 million cubic feet, which is first of all illegal not to use the metric system in India, but they go ahead and do it anyway. It is stored in TMC feet, and then it is allocated to different uses in different TMC. Different 1,000 million cubic feet are allotted to different people. When it flows out of the dam, it magically becomes millions of liters. And then it reaches your house and it becomes just a liter, or 9,000 liters, 1,000 liters of water in Bangalore today, in this highly subsidized and electrically inefficient way, which is pumped uphill, costs you 9 rupees for 1 cubic meter of water. People don't realize how much water is, because they happily pay 20 rupees for a 1 liter bottle of mineral water. Right? Can you imagine? All the mineral water guy is doing is getting water at 9 rupees for 1,000 liters and selling you each liter at 20 rupees. So people don't make that physical connection between, and just to add sort of a overlayer about this, rainfall is measured in millimeters. Please note, all these are referring to only one thing, the volume of water. Why do we have so many metrics to describe? First of all, you need to normalize that. Before it, otherwise people are not able to understand what is TMC feet, what is millions of liters, and then sewage for some reason is disposed again in millions of liters. And sewage, as you all know, is 85% recoverable water. We're actually literally gifting our water away to Tamil Nadu. And recently we have put in a batch of sewage treatment plants. There is a massive protest in Tamil Nadu that we are not giving them enough sewage so that they can supply us contaminated sopu, so contaminated greens. All of it comes from Tamil Nadu using the same sewage that you are throwing into the lakes and rivers. So unless we start understanding that there's an ecology of water systems, it is not just one or the other. For instance, Bangalore receives 900 millimeter of rainfall a year. Right? How many TMC feet is that? The total award of Bangalore by the Kaveri Fourth Straits Tribunal, because only half of Bangalore is in the Kaveri Basin, is 21.5 TMC feet final. We cannot get any more water out of the Kaveri. Right? But unfortunately, every year, this year it has been particularly heavy 900 millimeter has fallen in on the city, and about 890 million of 90 of that has gone to Tamil Nadu, and 890 translates to 17 TMC feet. That means in Kannada, if I say it in Kannada, it says Mattondu Kaveri Akashadinda Bilta ide, and we are letting it go. So Bangalore does not have a water problem. It has a water philosophy and a water management problem. If you learn to play this game correctly, the water will be the last thing Bangalore is worried about. The bigger problem is actually mobility.
How do we use the technology to sort of mitigate or reduce this problem that you just described?
By now the levels of sensor technologies available are extremely high. For instance, the whole of Bangalore, there are only about 20 official rain collecting gauges in the whole city. That's it. So there has to be, because the technology again is run by some meteorological department who doesn't do it properly. So really speaking, we are looking for startups who are able to deploy easy technology across the city to collect a variety of data, particularly about water. For instance, I'm working now with the government to start refurbishing the stormwater drains of Bangalore and making them stop carrying sewage and actually carry stormwater. But if you ask the BBMP, for instance, how much stormwater is flowing inside, so the guy tells me 100 million liters a day. I said, sir, is that sewage or stormwater? He's saying sewage. They have no data on stormwater at all flowing in the system. I mean, a very simple flow sensor with a, what do you call it, the A-frame flow meter, which costs almost nothing, right? It can be done. So now we have worked with the government, with the Karnataka Disaster Monitoring Center. I'm also working with them now, starting to install everywhere and start giving people flood warnings if that level starts rising, and also actively measure. So, like a famous architect, that friend of mine called Richard Urman once said, if you can't measure it, you cannot quantify the problem. You cannot keep making vague statements like lots of water and lots of problem. But without quantification, we have no data. And like Mr. Lakani pointed out, the integration of this information from different silos into a single dashboard, and developing the city dashboard is probably one of my next projects that I said that I'm working as a digital twin. All this relies heavily on sensor technology, on various other kinds of technology, and the whole thing has to talk to each other, cross-platform, cross data sets, different formats, everything has to become normalized. Sounds like a pipe dream, but we're trying to use this digital twin technology now to be able to do this in Bangalore.
Panelists and Mustafa, just a quick time check. Yeah. We have exactly 23 minutes more and a hard stop.
Yeah, we'll open it up for question and answers shortly, sir. Thank you for that, Naresh. It sounds like a problem which involves a lot of technology, engineering, and startups to be able to deal with this water issue, both in the built environment and in the public space.
Also using robots, using drones. We have started using all this stuff already. And slowly now we are starting to get a sense of what the city is actually doing.
Yeah, so I would actually appeal to the organizers of this event and the larger Thai community I think we need to focus on this water issue and the opportunities therein, both on the consumer side as well as on the supply side and the management side. There seems to be a hell of a lot of scope for all kinds of new things to happen and probably new value to be created. Of course, I'm stopping my Naresh here because if I allow him to continue, he will finally blame the engineers for all the woes of this problem. This has been a sort of a bear bug between me and Naresh because he's architect and I'm engineer, and discussions between me and him always lead to the conclusion that the engineers are the problem. So with that kind of sort of small observation, I'd like to, I think it was very insightful, the discussion on the water part. And we've dealt with a couple of issues in this panel discussion. We've looked at built environment, we've looked at urban planning and sustainability, We've looked at both on the healthcare perspective, both at a micro level, at the wearable level, and how this can sort of improve the entire healthcare management, as well as the public health part, including the lifestyle part, as well as the COVID related issues. So I think we've covered the ground. There are obviously in each of these areas clearly visible opportunities for young startups, or just startups, whether young or middle-aged or old is not the issue. I think that there is a lot of value that can be created in the whole area of smart and green urban living. The mobility part was partially addressed. I'd like to just add 2 minutes on that. We are looking at low carbon or carbon neutral mobility as the green part of urban living. Now, this means many things to many people, but just to give you a perspective on the electric side, it will become genuinely low carbon or green if we are able to use renewable energy to produce electricity and use that electricity for transportation. The government of India is already seized of this. Just for everybody's information, we have about 350 gigawatt of installed power generating capacity in this country. But by 2030, it will be much more than that. And we are looking at a 450 gigawatt renewable energy program in the next 10 years. And it's proceeding fairly aggressively. So we will have a lot more renewable energy in our system, which can be used for transportation and mobility. So that's one side of it. The other side is the hydrogen part. India has one of the largest coastlines among many of the countries of the world. Hydrogen can be green hydrogen can be produced very easily. There are technologies now which have become mainstream. At about 2.5 rupees cost of electricity, I can generate or produce hydrogen which is economically viable. 2.5 rupees is now the cost at which solar energy can be produced in India. However, to convert hydrogen to electricity needs different technologies like fuel cells and so on. And that is something that a lot of work is going on. As we speak, fuel cell buses are being deployed for trials in India, starting from as early as next month. And I happen to be involved in some of those projects. The other thing is in electric mobility, we need to see how to reduce the size of batteries, because the whole problem of recycling batteries and dependency on lithium, etc., can be a challenge. So we are looking at different technologies like dynamic charging, where the vehicle can be charged while it is moving. Just for everybody's information, pilots of such projects are already running in 3 cities in the world. One is in Tel Aviv in Israel, the other is in one of the big German cities, and one in Sweden. And hopefully, if that happens, we will also have that technology suitable for highways, which can be used for larger vehicles like buses and trucks. Low carbon mobility, the lowest carbon mobility is to walk. Like Dr. Giridhar Babu pointed out, it's very healthy, it's very clean, you don't consume you don't burn anything, and therefore to create no emission problems. We are already using electricity to move people in the urban metro rail systems. Electric buses or hydrogen buses will definitely be part of our ecosystem as we go forward. India is largely a two-wheeler country. 80% of the vehicles on road, registered vehicles on road in India, are two-wheelers. The two-wheelers represent a very easy to go electric option because you don't have air conditioning on the two-wheeler. The power to weight ratios are very favorable. A 110 kg scooter can carry 2 people who weigh between themselves about 150 kilos. If you compare that to a Tesla car, which weighs 2 tons, and you can carry 5 people in it. So, you know, the power to weight ratios are very relevant. You get a lot more mileage from the same battery on a scooter. Typically, a scooter gives you 30 kilometers to a kilowatt hour, whereas a Tesla car gives you about something which is about roughly 1/5 of that, or sorry, 1/6 of that. So this is the reality. And I think on mobility, there is technology that is coming in, but at the same time, connected vehicles are coming in. And I differentiate between connected and automated driving or autonomous driving. I think in India, we will see a hybridization of electric mobility with connected vehicles and hybrid IC engine vehicles eventually coming up. And different percentages of these vehicles will obviously coexist on the road. The consumer will finally decide this. The compelling product proposition and value proposition will decide which technology will prevail. But in public transportation, clearly electricity is already being used for running the metro, and hopefully that will be generated more of it in renewable form. electric buses or hydrogen powered buses, which are also electric. We call them fuel cell electric vehicles, will also come on the road. Two-wheelers will largely go electric going forward because it's sensible and practical to do. I agree today it is a little more expensive, but we see those costs coming down as we go forward when the volumes go up. So that's a brief perspective on technology. On the connected vehicle side, I think, again, we go back to the issue of if everything gets connected, there'll be gigabytes of data per hour coming out. How do we make sense of this for better traffic management? How do we make sense of this for improving efficiency or reducing time of going from point A to point B? Ability to provide a seamless multimodal kind of transport experience or mobility experience for the citizen, like what Dr. Giridhar Babu said, you buy one card, it works everywhere. This has already been done in India. In some cases, it is being extended to other places. Delhi has started with that facility. Kochi has started with that facility. You can travel in Kochi on the bus and the metro with using a single card, for example. I mean, I say this because I tried it. So that's kind of actual experience. So that's a brief overview of where the mobility paradigm is going. We're running a little short on time. So back to Mr. Anand. And before that, thank you for all the very valuable insights by each of the panelists. This is a very complex topic. We can't do justice to it in an hour or an hour and a half. But I think the top three issues of takeaway from each of the panelists are very clear. Those who are in the startup community, those who are entrepreneurs can probably build business models around that and see how to do it. There are also roles that TIE can take up to facilitate this whole thing in a different form. With this, Anand sir, I would go back to you and request you to conduct the question and answer session, because, or maybe somebody else from the TIE system, because there may be questions which could be grouped up and posed to one or more of the panelists. Is that okay with you, Anand sir?
Yeah, Mustafa, we do have some more time.
Yeah.
Because one, questions have not yet appeared, and we have another 10 to 11 minutes. So one of the things that, what I would like to point out, I think one of the things that you wanted to cover were green spaces in urban, which I think during Naresh's first round, we said we will cover later.
Yeah.
So you may want to cover what are we doing for green spaces, what are the alternatives, how do we regenerate greenery, and for a Bangalorean like me and you and all, we have seen 70% of the greenery of Bangalore gone in 60 years, just like my top. Okay, so maybe you want to discuss the greenery aspect of it, which is so important, both aesthetically, clean air, and for regeneration that happens through trees.
Sure, sir. Yeah, Chirag is smiling because his top is still very populated. So he's not lost anything. So can I go back to you? Naresh, are you there?
Yeah, I got back, sir.
So could you kind of sort of provide a little bit of insight onto this so-called greening of urban areas? Yes, Bangalore would be a specific.
So what we've done is the government now has initiated, we have initiated a survey, Anand, we have initiated a survey of the whole of the city to find out, and let me just tell you all that it's not as dreary as it sounds. There's a lot of data being thrown about which are not been very well validated. Bangalore, yes, has lost a lot of green cover over the last 15-20 years, but all is not lost. There are still large pockets all over the city, which are like, what we have done now is identified a lot of brownfield sites, abandoned industrial estates, government facilities, things which are not used probably, and we are now creating a set of tree parks across the city. The first two will be announced on 17th of this month by the Chief Minister. You'll be all glad to know, all of you are from the industry. And Mustafa particularly will be glad to know because his grandfather was the first managing director of the chairman of the company called NGEF, behind the Bayapanalli metro station. It's 100 acres of land, out of which it is with more than 14,000 trees on it. And that is now being opened up to the public and is going to become an urban forest. And the funniest thing, significant size, and this will be close to 100 acres. out of which about 70 acres will remain as an urban forest, and 30 acres of manufacturing shed will now become a public space for exhibitions, for sports, for all kinds of public-oriented if you for bars and pubs and things like that. That is one.
For a moment, we lost you there, so maybe you need to just go back a little bit.
Where did you lose me at the?
We lost you. Maybe you may want to turn off your video if you have bandwidth issue and just stick to audio, Naresh.
Yeah. So at what point did I drop off?
The NGEF stuff.
The 30-acre part.
You didn't hear any of it. Good Lord.
No, we heard part of it. The 30-acre part is where we sort of lost.
No, the 30-acre part, 35-acre part is actually manufacturing sheds, which we are not removing, but we are converting it into spaces for public spaces for people, for exhibition centers and for elite sports for common people. We are going to put in some all kinds of other public amenities, including Karnataka Handicrafts Bazaar. And it's a very clever site because from a mobility perspective, it's right behind the Bayapalli metro station. And right next to it is the intermodal transit hub. And on the other side is the Krishnarajapuram railway station. So you will have like multiple ways to get to it without ever using your car. That is one. And they're also doing another one, which we will talk about on the 17th, which is the Mysore lamps factory in Malleshwaram, which is about 22 acres, again about 9,000 trees. And that is going to become something called Experience Bangalore. And it's going to become a museum of the city of Bangalore itself. But the whole point of it is also that it has a fantastic green environment and the greenery will be preserved forever. It will not become a development project. Other than this, the government has now taken up extensive greening plans. A lot of volunteers have come forward and extensive greening plans across the city where abandon this idea of grassy lawns in parks and convert a lot of the existing ones into dense tree parks, which is what is really going to make any impact on climate change if it's going to come. The biggest thing we are all facing as architects is earlier architects used to design for climatology. That is, you respond to a climate system, which is supposed to be how to make a building sustainable, green and continuous and not screw up the environment every time we build something. But what is happening now is, in my practice at least, we now design for climate change. We don't design only for climate conditions. You also forecast what will happen. But what we are trying to do is, in many of the buildings, we are saying that why do we, even though a building occupies footprint or a campus occupies physical footprint, we are now making a brief that the landscaping of the project will be 105 to 110% of the original land area. That is, take the greenery above the building, on the terraces, make the terraces and the open spaces also into. The most pleasant thing you can do in an office is look out onto greenery. I have that privilege in my office. I wish everybody could have it, but it's possible to do it if you start thinking about this as an essential part of life. Many other cities are experimenting with many other goals like this. It's not just the trees alone will not solve the problem. You need to also increase the albedo levels of the roofs. Bangalore, for instance, in Google Earth looks uniformly gray if you look at it, and that can easily be changed with making people adopt various techniques like rainwater harvesting, creating green roofs, growing urban agriculture, increasing the output of urban agriculture. The other point somebody else made in the meeting was Seshasai, I think, said that we're bringing materials from all over the planet, and it's time we stopped eating California apples and started growing badnekai in our roof itself. So every one of us, unless we do a little bit of contribution, it is not enough to say that the government must do what it should. I would encourage all your listeners to also start doing some urban gardening at home. Grow your own vegetables to start with. They're anyway more healthy than eating polluted vegetables, which is grown in sewage mostly, which is fed by nutrients in sewage and maybe sometimes heavy metal contamination also. So what is happening is, I think there is a bunch of initiatives. I think the fall has been arrested. If you try and cut a tree in Bangalore today, 50 people will come on the road and try to stop you. So the environmental awareness has increased, but unfortunately, government is as usual slow to catch up with what should be done. I think it's a lot of effort from people, common citizens as well as corporates, to be able to volunteer and to make the city a greener place is mostly welcome. One more last project I would like to tell you is that Bangalore stormwater drains are almost 850 kilometers. I know I'm giving a lot of examples of Bangalore today, but it's applicable to any other city in the world. 850 kilometers of stormwater drain has become the backyard and the grey infrastructure of the city. We are now going to convert all that into green infrastructure and create an alternative mobility corridor, which is also an ecological corridor. Once we start doing all these things, you will see the results in the next few years as it happens. I think Bangalore will remain livable. And the one thing you don't have to worry about in water management, we can master through technology, is that we'll not run out of water for a long time to come.
Thank you, Naresh, for that very, I would say, exhilarating thoughts.
Okay, watch the TV space. Watch the space on 17th. The press conference is at 11 o'clock, so it will get reported quite heavily. And if any of you would like to participate in these projects, you're quite welcome.
Sure, Naresh, you can count me in as a Bangalorean.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, Sesha, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I just want to say one thing. The silver lining with the pandemic is what I mentioned about the purpose of the built environment, like health, wellness, productivity that we speak, and need for sustainability that evolved over a period of time. The pandemic has actually not only opened the eyes and made all of us more sensitive about how and what we can do, both about the sustainability, about the wellness and health and wellness, and also how you can be productive, not in a more efficient way. So we have now what you call new perspectives and experiences. You can reduce the demand on the roads. You don't have to necessarily travel. You don't have to necessarily always be in person to do so many things that we were earlier thinking we need to be. So I think we have to take learnings from whatever happened, and so then the real transformation can happen in all these areas.
Thank you, Sesha. Now I'd like to, before handing it back to Anand sir, Anand, Madan Gopal and Dr. Giridhar Babu are also online. Would you like to add anything to what you have just heard, sir, about the green part of urban living? Anand, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Mustafa. No, I guess like Naresh, I think, pointed out, solutions to urban living is not about making bigger roads. The less you travel and the more optimum you travel with your big cars and things like that, spaces will be available for green. And getting tree cover rather than the fancy lawn, which also he mentioned, I think goes a long way. We as a family are also practicing people of grow your own vegetables, which is another thing that he mentioned. I think that goes a very, very big way, because it is very simple to grow a fancy plant vis-a-vis a vegetable plant which you would consume in some farm. That would reduce and bring up good green cover across the city. I think all urban scenarios have this. So adding to all forms of transport, which will actually create trouble on the roads, walking and other things actually all contribute in a way towards making things green and healthy living.
Thank you, Anand, for that. Dr. Babu, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, so any last thoughts from you?
Mr. Babu has actually seen this presentation which we made to the Chief Minister.
So I should see.
You were present one day, I remember that.
Oh, yeah. Okay, great. So I think the way forward definitely is, I definitely allude to all the speakers here in terms of how sustainable living ecosystem can be created. I only hope as I said earlier, we create a mechanism of following it up and then ensuring that these change agents become the leaders in getting Bangalore or other cities on the path for sustainable living. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Babu, and thank you to all the panelists for very insightful comments and very patient articulation of the perspectives that they have. I found this session extremely educative and enlightening. I hope the other people who have attended this would also find it the same way. And thank you again for sparing all of your valuable time and contributing in this fashion. And thanks to Tai and the organizers, and special thanks to Mr. T.R. Anand for sort of coming up with this whole idea and being the architect of today's activity. With that, I would go back to Anand sir for his closing comments and closing the session. Over to you, Anand sir.
Yeah, thank you, panelists and Mustafa. It's really indeed been a pleasure putting this together, and all you folks are each experts in your own field, and having such a diverse panel, the audience would have really benefited. Thank you all for sparing your time in the middle of the day today to spend a whole almost 2 hours exercise. It has been a learning experience for me, and I think the audience would have benefited a lot from such a rich, diverse, and cohesive approach to smart green urban living. So on behalf of TIE Bangalore and IoT Forum, thank you once again for an excellent session. We now close the session and we are all set. It's 3:45 to start the next session. So over to Shivi, our host from TIE. Thank you once again, panelists.
Thank you. Namaskara.
Namaskara, everybody.
Thanks a lot. It was a very interesting session.
Thank you.
So we have.
So Shivi, I will stay on for the next session.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
We have Ashok sir and Bernie with us.
Yeah. Hello. Good afternoon, Ashok,
Hi.
and good morning or good afternoon to Bernie.
Still morning there.
Good morning from me here in the UK, yes.
Yeah, good morning to you. And I'll just wait for a minute for our Zoom operator to say whether we are going to go on live.
Yeah.
Are we live, Shivi?
Yes, we are live actually. If you want to take rest, we can go, on.
No, we are all set.
I think audience is here. I think we can get started.
Yeah, I think we are running right on time, and I think
taking a lot of questions from the audience.
Great. I don't think we'll be able to. The last session is over. It was so interesting. There was no time for questions. But this one, we need to be on time, and this is one of the disciplines of running an e-conference. So we, as a moderator or as a session owner, you just have to chop the previous session and continue. Okay, let's go on.
Yes.
And to all the audience worldwide, wherever you are, we're going to have a very interesting session on smart villages. So the whole theme of this was smart living for citizens. So we had 2 hours or 1 hour 45 minutes of smart urban living, and now we shift focus and get to the larger part of the population of the country. A lot of the country still does not live in urban areas, though that's changing these days. So we are going to have a fireside chat by Dr. Ashok Das with Dr. Bernie Jones, both of whom you see on the screen. So my job as the session host is to introduce Dr. Ashok Das. So let me do that. Ashok and Bernie, welcome. Ashok, you probably remember me from your applied materials days, no?
Yes.
And then you
yes,
also
yes.
did one session for us at TIE office 2 years ago.
Well, it has been about a few years that I have not been so active at TIE, but as you can see, 2008 onwards, I have been with TIE.
Yeah, that's right. Very good. So let me formally introduce you, Dr. Ashok Das, and then I'll hand over the session to you for a fireside chat.
Sure.
So Dr. Ashok Das, very accomplished, decades of experience in clean tech, semiconductor equipment, smart irrigation, smart villages, rural electrification, rural empowerment. I can keep on going on like that. So he's very much involved and committed since 2008 when he launched or founded Sun Moksha. So he's the CEO and founder of Sun Moksha, and involved in very much committed to both as a startup and to build the what I would call the rural village ecosystem through a technology enablement. And he built the first smart village, the first smart irrigation systems in India, and so on. He chaired the Thai Clean Tech SIG of our, which was a forerunner to our IoT forum. And now we can see that the IoT forum has taken on and beyond clean tech into about 10 SIGs now. So thank you, Ashok, for being an early starter in this area. So you are going to have a very insightful and an exciting fireside chat. Just to complete the introduction, Dr. Ashok Das has a very accomplished educational career. He's a graduate of IIT Kanpur, BTech and MTech, and has his PhD from University of Southern California, Los Angeles. So without any further ado, over to you, Ashok, and we will have a hard stop at 4:30 p.m. when there's the next session. So over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be here. I know it has been a while, but it's always good to be back at TIE. And as part of the sustainable living, Mr. Arvind Tiwari, our senior and my mentor, asked us that we should do one session on smart village as well. People see that what smart living in the cities are. And as Anand, you said that you dedicated 1.5 hours, 1 hour 45 minutes to the population, which is 1/3 of the population that we are going to spend 45 minutes on. So that gives the perspective on how much time we really spend on the population or the section of the people who are really in the villages and who form a larger part of our ecosystem. And as you can see, this is one of the villages that we did, and I always like to go back to the villages. Sustainability is built into the villages. Our villages are not as unsustainable as our cities are, period. So in the villages, our challenges are very different. Okay. In cities, we are trying to mitigate. We are trying to see that how we can, get us out of the mess that we have been. On the other side, in the villages, we are trying to see how we can bring them or get them into the mess. But no, that's not the right way. But we are trying to uplift. So the population is very different. The population is all the sins of the cities. The bearer of the impact are the villagers for no reasons, right? The climate change impacts the villages the most. The climate change impacts the poor the most. How do we help? How do we take proper action so that we can mitigate or we can adapt the changes in the climate and its impact on the villages? And we have, there are multiple ways we have been trying to do. There are many ways people have started to define what is a smart village. There is a lot of effort going on. It started with Adarsh Gram. And I would say that it actually started with Gandhiji in India, right? Gram Swaraj is nothing but smart village. Now we are calling it smart village, but that is what Gram Swaraj meant, that villages should be self-sufficient, they should be prosperous, they should be able to live a peaceful and happy life as we see anywhere else. So in this journey, I also came into contacts with many people, and one of the groups that was outstanding and that started doing a lot of work is the Smart Village Research Group. Even though it was formed later, it started from Cambridge and Oxford. Two faculty, two professors from these two universities started this whole journey, and Bernie joined them along the way. Bernie is himself accomplished professional. He has degrees from both Cambridge and Edinburgh, and he has been associated with the University of Cambridge. He is currently the CEO of the not-for-profit group called Smart Village Research Group. Bernie has traveled sort of the world, the entire earth. Yes, many times we find him missing in the villages and in the wilderness of Africa and inaccessible. He has visited India. We have, the Smart Village Group did a large research, really a very nice research, multi-million-dollar funding from research group, which Bernie will tell you more about, to do study of the smart villages across the world. So they have, they have case studies and issues and challenges and status from across the world. That very nice report came out about 2-3 years ago. And since then, the research, the Smart Village Research Group was formalized, and Bernie is now, Bernie, along with Sir Brian Heap and the entire team, is actively looking at various ways to make Smart Village happen. With this introduction, I will let Bernie introduce and say a few words, and then we will go into the, some fiery discussion, since it's a fireside chat. Bernie?
Thanks very much for that introduction, Ashok, and thank you very much to the organizers and indeed to the entire audience, regional and I hope worldwide, who are spending their afternoon or mornings, if they're in my part of the world, listening to us have this discussion. And I think you were absolutely right to start your introduction, Ashok, by pointing out the inequities. The reason that we started this, and originally, you're right, it was the Smart Villages Initiative, a research initiative led by a Cambridge-based charitable trust that we ran, and we saw everybody in the world getting very excited about smart cities, and now I still laugh. You look around the world, well, maybe not this year with COVID, but in previous years, there were more than 100 conferences every year on smart cities. And you stand back and you think, but half of the world's population don't live in those cities. And the majority of the world's population, the majority of the world's poor population, certainly don't live in those cities. So it is incumbent on us to think about the world's rural population. And indeed, we're at a unique place in time when, as you were saying, essentially this is not a new idea. Gandhiji was trying to do things for villages and village sustainability a long time ago. But now we're in a situation where the technology that we've developed and the world's sort of infrastructure and ICT systems are at a place where Dr. Abdul Kalam's dream of being able to provide those urban amenities to rural communities is actually, at least theoretically, eminently possible. And we're at a stage now where that can be done on a cost sustainable as well as a socially sustainable basis. So that is, to me, the most exciting thing about this smart villages concept that we're all talking about, is that we're at a time and place where all of these things can come together: the technology and the social environment, and working with governments and local governments and trying to and development agencies to try and make this happen. And we're at a stage now where, with the right approach, that is eminently possible and eminently sustainable. And it's just incumbent on us as the practitioners and the researchers in this space to think about what are the best ways to help make that happen.
Perfect. So yes, so you're right that there is a big inequity which needs to be addressed. But at the same time, there is a big debate. What is a smart village? Everybody has their own definition of smart village. Especially I have met many people, many in the government and many others, who think that if you give the Wi-Fi in the village becomes smart. You teach them how to do WhatsApp and teach them how to do Gmail, and log onto the website, that village becomes smart. But that was not the perception, that was not the vision that, you rightly pointed out, Dr. Kalam, his Pura concept. And that was not the concept that he had. In fact, he didn't have the smart component, right? When he wrote, there was very little smart component. So what we at Sun Moksha did is we picked up the whole concept and said, okay, let's add the smart component to it. And that makes it a complete village. So you have been around the world, you have seen this. What do people think about, what are the various, how do they perceive smart village?
I think you're right. And it has tended to generate almost as many different ideas of what it should mean as there are people engaging with it. So we've had people who are maybe educators that say, oh, smart villages, so that means everybody has to be completely educated, and people who as with many of our audience today, I'm sure, who are heavily involved in Internet of Things technology, they immediately think that a smart village is one where every single tool and every single person must have some sort of internet connected device on them, so that it's all about massive networking. But I think for us, and through the research that we did over the period of 7 years, from 2011 until 2018, it was very clear that starting from looking at one-dimensional development, just looking at energy access, that energy access in a community didn't make any sense unless the community was able to do something with that energy. So people started looking at productive uses and how energy could be put to use in the village. But then you look beyond that and say, well, it's not just enough for people to start, improving their agriculture with the energy or setting up shops. You have to look much more widely. And look at community services and health and education and how they can be benefited by energy. But then you realize that that's a two-way street, and all of those things in turn also affect energy. And you start to look at the wider picture then, and you say, okay, so there's no point in providing energy to people if they then don't have enough nutrition in that village to be able to live a good life. There's no point vaccinating children if they then cannot go to school. And you realize very rapidly that this is a completely integrated, completely, networked social situation, which of course then puts us in mind of all those wonderful sustainable development goals. And you realize that this is really what we're talking about. So it's standing back from individual technologies or individual approaches, and rather than saying, right, we're doing something energy based, or we're doing something health based, or something education based, or something gender based, you stand back and you start from the bottom up, from the community, and say, what does this community want themselves to be able to succeed? And the technology is a catalyst in that, and it's a combination of energy and ICT and broadband and skills. But actually it's about how do all of those different aspects, all of those different sustainable development goal priorities, how can they all be brought together to help that community achieve what the community wants to achieve, without compartmentalizing yourself into a particular silo and saying, no, I can only think about health and not the other things, or I can only think about energy and not the other things. So it's about breaking through those silos and looking at what the village themselves want, help them design a business model, a social model to make that sustainable, use all the technological tools that we have developed and indeed are continuing to develop, but bring that together in a holistic whole, to benefit that community. And that's what I think we mean by smart. It's by looking outside the silos and seeing the community in an integrated way.
Correct. So I call it like inside out perspective, right? So
Yeah.
you go become a part of the community and then see what does that community really require to move into a different stage. just like cities, every city is different, every town is different. So similarly, every village is different. Every village needs are more, more or less same, but still there is a customization for every village that is needed. And in your study that you did a few villages in Nigeria, I think Rwanda, Nigeria, some of Africa, then Asia, India. What differences have you found? Means, was there anything which is common across that these are the things that needs to be done, or there was something that meant that, hey, we really need to let them flourish on their own? And how can you make a platform that can cut across and help them out?
I think that's the key thing, is to think about how to create that platform. It was very interesting in the international work that we did, looking at different communities, looking at different approaches, because I think we saw very quickly how easy it is to think that a one-size-fits-all approach can work. So, for example, we started our research in Africa, where we saw that the successful projects involved a lot of productive use of technology. So whatever technology, whatever energy, whatever access to ICT that the people in the communities they would try to put to as much productive use, economic activity, generating money. So setting up shops, setting up services, selling things to their neighbors, because that was the way that they wanted to achieve their development outcomes. And I always remember that the very next piece of research that we did was with a community in the rainforest in Borneo, and it was a real eye-opener for us. We went to this community, which involved going to the university city of Kuching, in the Malaysian bit of Borneo. We drove from there 4 hours to the end of the road, crossed a lake on some dugout canoes, and then went 2 hours up a river into the rainforest to get to this village. And this was a village which had a mini hydro, and we were talking to them about what they did with their energy. And they were saying, "Oh, it's we, as you can see in our houses, we have we've got some radios and music." I said, "Maybe yes, but what do you do with the energy?" They said, "Oh, yes, we've got washing machines and rice cookers now." And I'm saying, "These guys aren't understanding me. How are they generating money?" I said, "No, what are you doing?" They said, "No, that's important, because we used to spend a lot of time cooking rice and washing clothes. So now we put that, and we can go and work in the paddy." I said, "Okay, fine, but what else do you do?" They say, "Oh, the lighting, we can do some crafts and sort peppercorns longer into the evening." And I thought, finally, now we're getting to it. I said, "Oh, and do you sell those?" They said, no, we just share them with our neighbors." And I thought, this is so strange. This is so different from Africa. But then spending a bit more time with the community, you started to realize what was different, and then what was the same. Compared with what we'd experienced in Africa. And of course, what was different was that they were living 6 hours away from the nearest urban center in the middle of a rainforest. And the Malaysian government, unlike the governments in Africa, provided their kids with free education. So every Monday, the kids went up the river to the free school and came back on a Friday. Even though they were in the rainforest, there was a clinic across the river from them in the rainforest, with one nurse who stayed there all year round to provide for the needs of the 16 villages in that rainforest. And even if they had produced those crafts, how could they have sold them? First, they would have had to go 2 hours down the river, and then 4 hours down the road to the city. And so we realized, actually, no, for this community, the most important thing was to improve their quality of life, with radios and music, but also to improve their own personal productivity. So they didn't waste their time on cooking, they could go and grow food instead. And we realized that actually, therefore, it's not about what you do with the technology and the resources that makes the village smart. It's about how that whole thing is approached. And we saw all the successful attempts at rural development that were really sustainable for the long term had started with the community, and asking the community, what is it that you want? How can you improve your lives, rather than a bunch of foreigners coming in and seeking to impose, you know, their ideas, or maybe even, you know, we've seen it so many times. A company develops a particular tool, a particular piece of equipment, and then tries to impose that piece of equipment on as many different places as they can sell it. And in some places that'll work, and in some places it won't. So we realize, yes, it's much slower to work from the bottom up, but that's the only way to generate the true sustainability. And I think that's what we learned from the international experience of looking at the different case studies. Is it's what is common to all of those is anchoring the project in what the community needs and making it bottom up, and actually the particulars of what you do will change then from community to community.
Correct. Actually, we have seen the same thing, and you know, whether it is in India, whether when I went to Gambia, when I went to Burkina, everywhere the situation, you know, I did not find that the villages are different. You know, all villages were similar. The needs were different. Everybody were at a different level of requirement. And that is what the technology needs to meet to make sure that the village keeps improving on that ladder. For example, many villages we have gone, we said that, hey, shall we set up microgrid? Shall we give you light? That's don't give me light. I can live without my light, but give me power for my irrigation. Give me power so that I can go and earn some money. So we have realized that the SDG 8 became the main driving force for many of these folks, that unless we empower them to earn, to move up the value chain, you know, improve their quality of life in terms of economic development as well, the villages will not become smart, and the villages will not go where we want them to go. There are definitely many villages which are way ahead of the game, right? And they are on the path, so not various interventions are required. So with this diversity in the villages, now this is a IoT conference, this is a Thai conference, you know, entrepreneurial ecosystem. What are the challenges that we have seen, or you have seen in these villages? How do we make this happen? And how can our entrepreneurs play a role? What are the various opportunities that can be exploited? Because it has to eventually, while it is a social, you know, highly social activity, but it has to come into profitable activity as well. Otherwise, we will stay where we are unless someone sees that, yes, I can create a business out of this developing smart villages. Not many people will come, right? And that is why you see that the sustainable living smart city session is much longer than the smart village session. So how can we target that smart village becomes much larger than the smart cities opportunities?
I think probably the way to do it is just by doing more things like this, demonstrating the opportunities that there are in working in smart villages. And to me, it's such a fertile ground for entrepreneurship, because we have found now from the practical things that we are now doing in communities, as I'm sure that you have, that actually the whole field is there are so many things that could still be done. You know, so many technologies that we're using in communities, for example, are designed and optimized for on-grid urban settings, and whilst they will work in villages, they don't quite work optimally. So just, you know, slightly tweaking those technologies and slightly modifying them and designing new versions that can be used in a rural setting optimally and at low cost, you know, is a great opportunity. There are so many opportunities for technological development as well, but there are also, I think, great opportunities for entrepreneurs to think about some of the social models. So how can a community itself that maybe doesn't have a great technical grounding or a great business grounding, how can they be taught the skills to be able to manage these systems themselves sustainably into the future. You know, what are, look entrepreneurially at what are some of the best business models for developing this? You know, what are some of the innovative investment models for this? Because it's not the same as you know, building a big piece of infrastructure in a city, and you have very established ways for that to be financed and for repayments to come in. You know, things are much more difficult and much more fluid and much vaguer when we're starting to work in the rural settings with people that maybe don't have a financial track record. They maybe haven't had experience of managing money. They might only barely have bank accounts or have mobile money systems. So how can you as developers work with those people? Some new investment models are needed as well, and how can you as developers actually get the investment that you need to be able to capitalize your system? So all of those, I think, are great fertile grounds for entrepreneurship. But I guess the question that will strike those entrepreneurs when they start to look at it are the same sorts of questions that will strike sort of you and us as we do our work. And I'm going to ask the question back to you. So working in the way that we do, you know, working in a bottom-up way with the villages, tends to be a little bit slower, because first you have to start talking to the village and seeing what you want. So in terms of what we present to the outside world, you know, maybe to a funder, to an investor that's looking to invest in our business, you know, they're looking at us and we say, yes, we have a better model, and but it looks slower and it looks a bit more complicated than somebody else that's just, you know, invented a piece of equipment and they want to make 10,000 pieces of that equipment and sell it to 10,000 different villages. So how do you go about demonstrating the long-term value of our approach and the reason why it's worth putting in that extra effort for something that on the surface looks a little bit slower and a little bit messier?
Correct. And see, if we look at the entire village ecosystem, right? I mean, I define it that majority of the village population is in the agriculture sector. Majority. I mean, more or less, farming and agricultural, you know, activities are their major activity. And and then there are some rural industries, small industries, but more or less we will say that it revolves around agriculture, but that is the beginning, and that it moves on from there. So there are solutions, say for example, agricultural solutions, irrigation solutions, there are energy solutions, there are ICT solutions. You know, see, even the villagers, right? They would. As far as payment is concerned, they're willing to pay for your phones, for the satellite TVs, for satellite dish, etc. But when it comes to basic, they said, no, I don't want to pay. So there is a dichotomy in the revenue model and the business model, that what business model will work and what will not work, and how do the entrepreneurs tread that path, because it is going to be, you know, and unlike city where you can find a large number of customers in a smaller geography, in village that's not the case. You know, it's a larger number of geographies to get to that kind of a customer base to make a business sustainable. Mm-hmm. So any thoughts on that? Have you seen any different models there?
I mean, it's a tricky one. I think there isn't a there's no good solution yet, I think, to the financial side of things. I mean, in terms of capitalizing the businesses like ours, although I think some combination of the sort of the social side of investment, which wants to make a return but also sees a good impact as a return, and that is a bit more patient with its investment, is the way to go. And the customer side, I think there is a very interesting one, and again one that really does lend itself to some more entrepreneurial solutions now. You know, recently we've been seeing a lot of people working in geographical information systems starting to work with organizations like ours, because you're right, trying to do the sort of in-depth work in communities that we do before we can start working there. You know, if you're going into a new area and you have to try to get to 1,000 different villages to work out which the 20 or 50 are that you want to work in, it takes an awful lot of time and an awful lot of money potentially. You know, just last week, my colleagues were off in Uganda wanting to take a look at 3 villages. One of them, the morning that they were driving there, the bridge washed out and isn't likely to be repaired for 2 months. So you know, they can't even get to that village. But
Yes.
I think harnessing the capability of satellite data and things like that is another really interesting you know, entrepreneurial opportunity in our space, and it just shows how every single type of technology that we're talking about at the moment can be applied to our intensely rural situations if only people are creative enough.
Perfect, great. I think we have a question from the audience, and Ashok Beda, I know him very well. So he's saying recognizing grassroots innovation is the key. Right? So while ICT interventions are thrust to rural ecosystem, any illustration to showcase here? I'll let you answer first, but I can also tell Ashok that this Ashok has also done such intervention, and you can come to our villages and it's full of ICT and technology interventions. So fully technology driven and complete remote monitoring, complete smart microgrids, which is nothing but IoT plus.
Yeah.
But anyway, Bernie, you go first.
Yeah, so I think things like ICT and access to energy, access to electricity are the, as we've said, are the catalysts for all of this. But there is still space for what we call, you know, appropriate technology. So it's recognizing that the highest technology isn't always the best for these rural situations. So you get some classic examples like, you know, the best performing battery might be a top of the line lithium one, but if that breaks, is it better to have had the top of the line lithium one and then have to wait 3 months to import a new one from California? Or is it better to use a slightly worse performing one, but which you can get a replacement for in any local shop? So you need to look at local technologies and work with the local community to see what is appropriate and what their preference would be, which may be slightly different from what is technologically optimal. And I think it's the same on the ICT side. So, you know, by all means, use the highest technology solutions, but make sure that there is a way of replacing those if they break, or there's the expertise or the source of spare components. But then also think about what the local kind of situation is. So don't make yourself solely reliant, for example, on a mobile data signal. You know, make sure that any tools that you put in have a kind of a peer-to-peer capacity and have a nice, you know, some local storage, so that if they are offline for 2 or 3 days, you haven't lost all of that data. So I think it's just about being aware of what your local constraints may be and planning appropriately.
Perfect. And I think that is where we also realize that the sort of now I think what is the name, I don't know, but there was something called fog computing, right? Mm-hmm. So not only have it on the cloud, but have it locally.
Yeah.
Manage it locally. And especially when you are dealing with essential services such as energy, water, there you cannot just say that if there is internet only, then I'll provide you the service. This service has to be provided despite or irrespective of whether it is connected or not connected.
Absolutely.
So ICT at the local level, and many places we just did fiber optics to connect the internally the whole village. Not depending on Wi-Fi, not depending on anything else. So there are a lot of other innovations that we need to bring in when you hit these villages, where you realize the challenges are very, very different.
Yeah.
The first village that we went, there was not even a mobile tower. How do I make myself, get all this data into the cloud? How do I manage my entire cloud solutions? So we had to go and change the whole thing. We went and revamped about 30% of our solutions so that we can go and still work in this village.
Yeah.
So these are, so you see a very different kind of challenge when you go into the villages than you see in the cities. So the entrepreneurs, I believe in this sector, have to be much more adaptive, much more agile, and much more, what do you say, uh, flexible
Yeah.
to adapt to different solutions, change their approach, adapt to the local approach, and then provide that kind of a solution.
I agree, but I think the key thing is also what you said in the middle of that piece, which is the importance of going to the village. It's no good to sit in your university lab and think, here's a nice piece of equipment that I can develop. Go to the village and see what the local situation is, and talk to the villagers about what they need to achieve, and then go back to the lab and think how you can adapt what you've got and what you're working on.
We have 5 more minutes, and there was one last question. What are the challenges faced to promote rural entrepreneurship in India? Okay, it's India specific, but I think this applies across the board. When I went to Ghana, we had the same issue. How do we do the rural entrepreneurship? You have any thoughts before I pitch in a few words?
Well, you're the expert, and in a sense, I think India is slightly ahead of the curve compared with a lot of other countries. I think the challenges that I would raise, in addition to the practical ones that you're going to come up with, are the relatively increased difficulty of helping the most remote communities, because there are so many rural communities, the ones that have good access to roads, can sell things, or are bigger or more entrepreneurial, better educated, are the easier ones to work with. But then I think an additional challenge that we then need to think about is, they're great. How do you deal with the most difficult, the most deprived, the most remote communities? Because that's a whole different equation.
Thanks. I agree with that. And what I would like to say in terms of with regard to India has been that I think that we need to aggregate, because one company or one person or one company cannot provide all these solutions.
Yep.
There will be various, multiple agencies giving solutions for different components, right? The smart village that or this Pura concept that we are implementing on the villages in Jharkhand, we are doing the same thing. We are not providing everything, right? We need a health center. There is another startup, another company who is coming and setting up the health center. So if once we collaborate and leverage each other, then it makes a much better value proposition and a business proposition and a business opportunity for so this is one area I would say that where we need to collaborate, not compete. Okay. So collaboration is the key. If you want to just go ahead on your own, hey, I am the one, I can go and push it through. It doesn't work that easily. Most of the people who we have seen successful, and it has been, the agri sector has been the one which has been sort of much more active and vibrant, especially post-COVID. But in general, I have seen that collaboration and working together and promoting a collaborative entrepreneurship is how we can take this further in India.
Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Das. We have another 1 to 2 minutes, and if you want to put in a last few words, please go ahead, and then we will have a hard stop.
Okay. Bernie, you have anything to say?
Well, maybe just, especially given the situation that we all find ourselves in the world at the moment, just to ask you what you think the particular impacts of this sort of work could be when you think about how the whole world is is dealing with COVID?
Okay, so we now it is the other way, right? It was supposed to be. So what we have seen is that actually post-COVID, a lot of focus, a lot of attention is going back to the villages. There has been a lot of migration issues, especially in India. Reverse migration, people are back there. There is not much jobs. They do not have many things to do. And that is when I told them about the Pura concept, the microeconomic zone concept. Now people are very interested that these kind of solutions make sense. We need to start focusing on solutions and methods or ways to generate employment, to generate livelihood, to improve the livelihood, provide them certain amenities that they can stay there and they can stay a better life, a good life there. It's not possible for everybody to get engaged in agriculture. More mechanizations are happening, and so we have to find more than just agri solutions. Just doing farming is not sufficient. It will not create enough economic impetus. So certain additional things are needed. And as far as reverse migration, like in this village, I myself have seen that example. Once we brought smart microgrid, once we brought economic opportunities in the village, many people returned to the village. It was way before COVID happened. So people do want to live there. People do want to be in the village. Everybody, likes to be with the family rather than, being a migrant worker in a village, in a city. And so COVID has really created much more opportunities for the villages than it was before.
On that note, thank you, Dr. Bernie Jones, for joining us from the UK today. And thank you, Dr. Ashok Das, for an excellent and insightful session. I promise you that from TIE Bangalore and IoT Forum, we will focus a lot more. We've got Agritech focus through Ashok Mehta, so we'll also have a few more. We would also like to see you more often in TIE Bangalore now. You're one of the veterans here. So on that note, we will close the session. We are all set to start the next session, which is the launch of the open challenge of STPI IoT Open Lab.
Great.
So we'll move on to the session. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Anand.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Our host, Shivi. Are we all set?
Yes, we are all set. So we have Sanjeev Omkar already joined in. We request all of you to please, we can start with the...
Are we live or are we waiting?
We are live.
We are live. Good evening to our audience today, and warm welcome from TIE Bangalore and IoT Forum to our esteemed guests and partner from STPI. So we welcome all the officers. We are going to have today with us very briefly Dr. Omkar Roy, Director General STPI, Shri Shailendra Tyagi, Director STPI Bangalore, Shri Subodh, Director STPI Headquarters, Shri Sanjeev Keskar, the Chief Mentor of STPI IoT Labs, and this session will be moderated by Shri Sudarshan, COO STPI Open Lab IoT. So without any ado, over to you, Shri Sudarshan.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this session. My name is Sudarshan, and I would be the moderator for this session. First of all, a warm welcome to all the dignitaries, the startups, partners, participants to this session. First of all, I would like to thank you for taking out time and being with us today. A very warm welcome to all of you. The session today is going to focus on various startup initiatives of STPI, the IoT Open Lab at STPI Bangalore, and also it concludes with the launch of the STPI Open Challenge of the IoT Open Lab at Bangalore by the Director General, STPI. So in this session, we have with us Dr. Omkar Rai, Director General, STPI, Shri Sanjeev Keskar, Chief Mentor of STPI IoT Open Lab. He was the ex-MD of Arrow Electronics and currently CEO of Arvind Consultancy. We have Shri Shailendra Tyagi, Director, STPI Bengaluru, and Shri Subodh Sachin, Director, STPI Headquarters, the MD and CEO of STPI Next Initiatives. A warm welcome to all the participants and all the dignitaries. Without further delay, I would like to invite Shri Shailendra Tyagi, Director, STPI Bengaluru, for the inaugural address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sudarshan. Respected DG STPI Dr. Omkar Rai, our esteemed present with us on the digital dais, Shri Sanjeev Keskar, Chief Mentor, STPI IoT Open Lab, Shri Subodh Sachin, my colleague from Director STPI Headquarters, participants from the industry, startups, academia, and my colleagues, namaste to all of you. Friends, STPI's untiring services to promote IT and ITS and electronic sectors over the last 3 decades have been a huge success in making this country to be recognized globally. You may also be aware that STPI not only supported the industry, but also supported and nurtured the budding entrepreneurs through its incubation programs for decades. And today, STPI has been recognized as one of the largest incubators in the country. Aligned with the Government of India initiative like Make in India, Digital India, and Startup India, STPI has started establishing Center of Excellences across the country in the emerging technologies like IoT, blockchain, AI, ML, AR, VR, fintech, etc., to build a robust and innovative startup ecosystem in the country. Under the said mandate, STPI has set up IoT Open Lab at Bengaluru in collaboration with Arrow Electronics, supported by Ministry of Electronics and IT, Government of India, with an objective of creating a technological platform that will enable innovative startups to develop disruptive IoT-based applications, products, and solutions across all the sectors. The COE has major electronics and semiconductor industry partnership network, which includes NXP, Microchip, ST Microelectronics, Infineon, onsemi, Kyocera, Littlefuse, and many more. In addition, the startups under COE will have mentoring and networking opportunities supported by industry associations such as ISA and TI. Similarly, PES and RV College of Engineering will provide academic expertise and mentoring to the startups, and VC partners Cyber Media and Forum Synergy to provide funding access and opportunities to the startups. Friends, IoT Open Lab has become operational since 21st of September 2020, and COA has been getting overwhelming response from the startup community. To give an insight into the salient features of the lab, it is just not a technological platform, but a complete support system to enable innovative startups to develop disruptive IoT-based applications, products, and solutions across many business verticals. The STPI IoT Open Lab provides complete testing and measuring equipments, sample bank of electronics, technology and business mentoring, on-site application engineering team for hand-holding, market assistance, and facilitation for funds to potential startups in the IoT space. The COE supports startups right from the idea stage to the go-to-market. In addition, facilities available with STPI Smart Lab and next generation incubation services of STPI shall also be extended to the IoT startups. Today is a very special day as DG STPI Dr. Omkar Rai will be launching the Open Challenge program of STPI IoT Open Lab for the IoT startups. It gives me an immense pleasure in welcoming our esteemed speakers in today's event. We are fortunate to have Dr. Omkar Rai, Director General STPI here today as the keynote speaker on this special occasion, whose vision and vibrant support has enabled us to set up the COE, which is expected to make a big impact in creating an innovation-led startup ecosystem in the IoT segment in the country. I extend my hearty welcome to you, sir. I extend warm welcome to Shri Sanjeev Keskar, former MD Arrow Electronics and CEO Arvind Consultancy, and Chief Mentor to our STPI IoT Open Lab, who is with us to cover the details of the COE in his address. I welcome my colleague from headquarters, Shri Subodh Sachan, Director STPI Headquarters, to grace this occasion. I also extend my warm welcome to industry captains, startups, industry associations, and one and all present here. Thank you. Over to you, Sudarshan.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the inaugural note and highlighting the various initiatives of STPI to promote startups in various technology areas across the country. This definitely is unprecedented and a boost to the startup ecosystem in the country. May I request all startups to take note of this initiatives of STPI and make use of the same. Now, I would like to request and invite Shri Subodh Sachan, Director STPI Headquarters, MD and CEO, STPI Next Initiatives, to address the audience.
Thank you, Sudarshan. Respected Director General Dr. Omkar Rai of STPI, my colleague Sri Shailen Tyagiji, Director from STPI Bangalore, Sri Sanjeev Keshkarji, all the startups enthusiasts who have joined this platform, and all the people from the industry. And I think today, within this second day of TI IoTMatrix annual conference, we have been privileged to witness the launch of the second Open Challenge program of IT Open Lab, which is, as Shailenji described, is already a center of excellence, which is getting an overwhelming response in terms of its participation of the startups, and also in terms of the intervention through its lab, which is created. In fact, as the startup story is unfolding across the globe, Government of India and especially STPI has taken several initiatives to promote domestic startups, and especially the startups who are engaged in product creation. With that focus, STPI has already, is building, and as Shailenji said, we are the biggest building, the biggest incubator of India. And this incubator ecosystem is primarily being built in a very collaborative way. Today, with the launch of an operationalization of 12 Center of Excellences across India, we have already, in fact, serving more than 100 plus startups, which are already getting, incubated or in the process of getting onboarded, incubated in these Center of Excellences. We are not just, stopping our march here. In next couple of months, under the guidance of Dr. Omkar Rai, we will soon be launching 11 more Center of Excellences, which are focused on various emerging technologies. So in fact, if I have to just say in terms of space of IoT, IoT Open Lab is our is a flagship Center of Excellence in Bangalore, right at the heart where the IoT activities is maximum. But beyond that, we also have other Center of Excellence like Electropreneur Park in Bhubaneswar, Electropreneur Park in Delhi, or Neuron Center of Excellence in Mohali, or Medical Technologies and Health Informatics Center of Excellence in Lucknow. All these are also supporting various IoT startups across the value chain, whether it is health informatics, sectors of health informatics, sectors of medical electronics, or even sector of automotive as well. I think the global opportunity presented on IoT space is humongous. Today, we are talking about millions of devices already connected through the IoT. In fact, the next study predicts that there will be billions of devices which will actually come into play as very soon. One of the study of the Gartner said that almost on an hourly basis, I'm sure IoTMatrix would have discussed on the various platforms the opportunities of growth within the IoT. In fact, the numbers which are saying almost every hour 1 million of new IoT devices are getting added to the network. That presents huge opportunity to the startups and to play to have a role across various value chain. And this is further aided by a lot of advancement in various technologies, whether it's technology of 5G, which is upcoming within India space, or whether it's technology of artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics, right? Across all these technologies, advancements which have happened, I think we are today in a cusp where IoT revolution is already being witnessed, and startups have a huge role to play. In fact, one of the conference we were there some time back, the opportunities which are being presented just because of 5G, advancement in 5G, are humongous, but that will not be addressed by the telecom operators. All these opportunities needs a lot of new use cases to be adopted, new use cases to develop, and startups are going to play a very, very critical role. And given that fact, I think we have already 4 or 5 centers of excellence just focused on IoT and utilization of IoT in various sectors, whether it is industrial automation, In fact, we will soon be having witnessing under the leadership of Shailenji, will be witness another center of excellence in efficiency augmentation, which will be Industry 4.0 to be launched in Bangalore very, very soon, right? Again, and this is the reason I'm bringing that up is very clearly that this industrial automation, where IoT will play a big role, is one of the sectors. And along with this, whether it is smart cities, whether it is transport and logistics, whether it is automotive and healthcare, or even personal smart wearables or home automation, I think all these sectors are now sitting at an edge where IoT has a huge role to play, and the startups have to fulfill this vision of getting new products and new solutions around that. Given that fact, I think I'm really thanks for privileged to be on this platform, and within this open challenge, like other open challenges which STPI has launched, where we have received overwhelming responses. We just concluded next generation incubation scheme, and within that scheme, we in fact we wanted to have every quarter hackathon and challenge program, but within the first quarter challenge program itself, we have received over 1,600 applications, and that itself talks about, and I think there are various forums and various spaces where people talk about the startup vibrancy of India. I think we are witnessing the startup vibrancy within STPI and within the startup innovation and promotion division. We are looking forward, we are gearing up ourselves to be very, very active player within this vibrant ecosystem of startups. With that note, I'm again I would request all my startups within Bangalore or outside Bangalore to make use of this facility of IoT Open Lab, to make use of the facility of the lab, to also to make use of the facility of the incubation ecosystem and rest of the ecosystem which is being driven and which is going to be brought to you through STPI and its collaborating partners. So again, I would thank Sanjeev ji, especially for his role in bringing the Center of Excellence through Arrow and all our partners, as Shailenji described. So thank you, and look forward to an open challenge launch by Honorable Dr. Omkar Rai ji in the upcoming minutes as well. So over to you, Sudarshan.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for highlighting the various initiatives and initiatives that STPA has taken to promote various technology areas across the country. It's definitely a boost to the entrepreneurs and startup ecosystem in the country. Thank you, sir. So now I would like to invite Sri Sanjeev Keskar, Chief Mentor of STPI IoT Open Lab at STPI Bengaluru, and CEO Arvind Consultancy to kindly address the audience.
Thank you, Mr. Sudarshan. Good evening, everyone.
You may want to switch on your video as well.
Yes, sir. Yes. Thank you, Subodhji. Good evening, everyone. Actually, this is a very, very exciting project driven by STPI Bangalore to set up this IoT Open Lab. And this concept itself is different. It's not just a center of excellence, but it is going to address all the key challenges faced by startups in IoT space.
Could you reshare your screen? Could you reshare your screen? We are not able to see your video.
Sure. Is it okay now?
It's just coming up. It'll take some seconds.
Can you see it now? Okay, if you can't see the screen, I will just go ahead. There are only 3 slides, so I will talk about those slides. Not an issue.
Sir, Mr. Sanjeev Keskar ji, see if you have the 2 check boxes ticked in terms of the sharing. Sometimes if the box is unchecked, you will not be able to share the screen.
Yeah, that box saying disable video. Okay.
So just optimize.
Now you should
yes, sir.
Portion, and we'll be able to see.
Okay, no issues. I'll just speak about 3 slides, my 3 slides. Thanks. So Okay, I'll stop sharing. So again, good evening. Thank you, Dr. Omkar Rai. Thank you, Shailendra Tyagiji and Subodhji and Sudarshanji for this opportunity. So as I was mentioning that we have completely different thought process when we were planning to set up this IoT Open Lab. The whole objective of this IoT Open Lab is how we can make the success rate of startups better. Okay, that was the whole premises when we started working on this particular program. That time I was with Arrow, and in collaboration with Arrow Electronics, STPI was driving this initiative, and Arrow was very happy to get associated with this program. And yes, please, you can share. Yeah, thanks. So what we thought that there is a huge opportunity coming up for startups in IoT space. In most of the earlier revolutions like telecom and industrial and consumer electronics, in India has really missed out opportunity for IP creation and doing a high value added ecosystem creation. But IoT is going to play across all verticals. It is going to be in automotive, it is going to be in industrial, consumer, home appliances. So it is opening up a very large opportunity for Indian startup ecosystem. Government is going to drive 100 smart city project. Then all new vehicles are going to be connected. It will have a tracker. It will have a OBD to diagnostic connectivity device. And then the smart appliances, like every home appliances in home is going to be connected and smart. Plus all utility meters, your energy meter, gas meter, water meter, everything will be connected moving forward. Solar pumps and smart grid again is a very large opportunity in industrial. So looking at this opportunity, we thought that this is the space where there are thousands and thousands of startups which will have an opportunity to do something, because IoT is everywhere. IoT is in every appliances. So we thought that how we can really leverage this opportunity and make startups successful. Then we went to the really analysis of why startup fail, because all of you know that more than 80% startup fail and only less than 20% are successful. Then we realized that there are three key reasons what is required to be addressed to make startups successful. First and foremost, they really don't have a visibility which technology platform or technical semiconductor architecture will make them techno-commercially successful. Means we have seen startup work for a year or two, and then they realize that they have created something which is either very expensive or which is not meeting technical requirement of the market. Second reason why startup goes through a challenge is there is no one to handle them or mentor them when they are developing any product or solution. And the third reason is the test equipment required for IoT type of product development, because you are going to develop right from sub gigahertz up to 5 gigahertz, variety of connectivity devices. And to test those devices, it requires very expensive test equipment. So in IoT Open Lab, we decided that we will address all these three challenges. First and foremost, we partner with Arrow Electronics, and they have their application team sitting in our STPI IoT Open Lab. So that team is going to do advocacy about the right architecture. They are going to support sample bank to ensure that the time to market is shorter. You have all the prototyping samples readily available. Then if you face any technical issue, be it a software or a hardware, there is a real-time mentoring available in IoT Open Lab by expert engineers who will do handholding and solve your problems. And then finally, we have set up excellent world-class test facility. It covers 5 gigahertz oscilloscope simulators, power electronic testing, 3D printer, you name it. Basically, you walk into lab with a concept, and then you can develop a complete prototype in this STPI IoT Open Lab. So this center is not just offering a center of excellence for IoT, it is also going to ensure that startups which are working in this center are successful in their mission. Next slide, please. So what are the different models of engagement? Okay, this is one key important point I want to touch base, that today electronics is so important vertical, but unfortunately whatever manufacturing we are doing in India is all low value added manufacturing. 40% value of any electronic product is into IP and technology, 40% value is in component ecosystem, and 20% value is into assembly, testing, and packaging. Unfortunately, today we are getting value of only EMS activity, which is around 10 to 15%. And unless we create IP and technology locally and the patents are filed out of India, products are designed out of India, we are not going to recognize the 40% value of IP and technology. And with this STPI IoT Open Lab, we are going to contribute to create a high value added ecosystem in IoT and electronics. Next slide, please. So what exactly we have done? STPI realized that most of the IoT startups are based out of Bangalore and around. So we chose Bangalore as a place for this IoT Open Lab. And then we have an application team from Arrow sitting in this IoT Open Lab. We have a sample bank, we have test equipment. And then we collaborated with two large industry association, TIE and IESA, to reach out to their members so that they can avail this lab facility. So process is very simple. One can register to IoT Open Lab program using the link which has been given on your screen. Next slide, please. There are two models of engagement in IoT Open Lab. First model is called complete package model, where a startup company has to pay 10,000 rupees registration fee, and then they have to give 3% stake to STPI. And then they can avail lab facility till they complete their project, as well as they will get sample support, application support, mentoring, as well as market access and VC support. The second model of engagement is if you are an established company, you don't want to part away with your 3% share, but you want to use the lab facility, test equipment, mentoring, then you can become associated member. It is like a pay-per-use model. You pay 10,000 rupees one-time registration fee and get 5 slots to use the lab facility of 3 hours each. And then if you need more slots, you can pay further and avail more slots. So this is a model where you can use on the need basis or the requirement basis. So with these two models, you can engage with STPI IoT Open Lab. That's it. This was my key message, that this lab is mainly made to make startups successful by mentoring, by sample support, and by offering the entire test equipment under one roof. So please avail this facility. If you need any information, you can actually visit lab. It is operational and fully functional. So I encourage all of you to leverage this lab facility. Thank you very much. Back to Mr. Sudarshan.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the address and highlighting the various facilities of IoT Open Lab at STPI Bengaluru. Now we go ahead with the keynote address by Dr. Omkar Rai. Dr. Omkar Rai is the Director General of Software Technology Parks of India. He has immensely contributed in repositioning STPI with a focus on innovation and dispersal of IT ESDM industry beyond metros. He brings in 30 years of experience in IT and ESDM sector. He has been instrumental in formulation of incubation programs and Center of Excellence to promote startups, entrepreneurship, innovation, and product creation across the country. His articles are published in various journals, newspapers, magazines, and he has been actively involved in promoting IT sector to smaller cities beyond metros, focusing on local youth empowerment and enabling startups, and also positioning India as a digitally empowered society. Prior to joining STPI, he served in National Informatics Centers and National Informatics Center in various capacities. He is currently serving as chairman of AIC STPI Next Initiatives. He is on the board of directors of MTNL STPI IT Services Limited, Haryana State Electronics Development Corporation. He is the member of the governing body of School of Open Learning, Delhi University. He is on the board of governors of IIIT Bhubaneswar and Executive Council of Vishwakarma University. He's a distinguished alumnus of Banaras Hindu University, from where he earned his bachelor's, master's, and PhD in statistics. I invite and welcome Dr. Omkar Rai, Director General STPI, to kindly provide the keynote address and launch the IoT Open Challenge of STPI IoT Open Lab at STPI Bangalore. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sudarshan Kitty. To present on this digital dais, Sri Sanjeev Keskarji, the Chief Mentor of IoT Open Lab, and a very close collaborator with STPI for a very long time. My colleagues, Director Bangalore, Sri Shailen Tyagi, my colleague from STPI headquarters, Subodh Sachan, who is also the Managing Director and Chief Executive of STPI Next Initiative. Sri T.R. Anandji, Sri K.T. Sudarshan, who has joined STPI family very recently. Most importantly, the participant in this IoTMatrix 2020 in this particular session. First of all, I must thank IoT Forum and TAI Bangalore for organizing this conference. And secondly, I must express my gratitude for allowing us to showcase our IoT Open Lab and also to create a launch for IoTMatrix 2020. We all now know, because of my colleagues Subodh and Sailendra, and even the presentation made by Sanjeev Keskarji, I think by now the participant might be knowing that STPI has already created a IoT Open Lab in Bangalore. We have budget about 15 crore, but that's not important. Budgets can always be enhanced and the requirements can be met. But the creation of IoT Open Lab is an statement of STPI, Government of India, Government of Karnataka, and industry as such. Several academia who have also joined us, we together have given a statement to all the beneficiary, prospective beneficiary, young boys and girls, startup community at large, the practitioners of IoT, that this IoT Open Lab is accessible to you, is open to you. That is how the name IoT Open Lab stands for. It connotes the openness of this laboratory. And that is why whenever I discuss with my colleagues about IoT Open Lab, I always try to reiterate that we have to really make it open. That would mean that we have to make it accessible by all prospective users, and therefore we have to popularize it, create awareness among the prospective users that we have an open IoT Open Lab in Bangalore, which can be accessed by you for whatever use you have. Apart from that, we are trying to screen in select startups for which we have a target of 500 number in another 5 years. We have already onboarded about 19 startups, out of which 13 startups are just associated with us. That would mean that they can access our IoT Open Lab facility, whereas they can work with other stakeholders to convert their ideas into technology product using IoT. That means it's an incubator, it's a lab. Those who are trying to work with us, they can access all those support that we have, as has been properly explained by Sanjeev Keskarji in his presentation, that we have people, experts there who are there to handhold you, work with you, convert your ideas into the product, and can expose you to the entire technology that IoT system has. So this is something which is very open. You either become our incubating startup, selected startup, or you can access this IoT Open Lab and do whatever you want by using IoT technologies available in our laboratories, apart from the mentors, the experts that are working around. In this connection, I must say that this IoT Open Lab is second in the entire world. First such lab exists in Hong Kong, and second such lab has been created in Bangalore. And we are very proud partners of Aero Electronics, ISA, TAI, Punjab PES, College of Engineering, RV College of Engineering, Government of Karnataka, Ministry of Electronics and IT, Government of India, and other stakeholders who are collaborating to make sure that any entrepreneur, any seeker in the field of IoT is presented with, afforded with everything that is required to convert their ideas into a IoT-based technology product under one roof, and that is IoT Open Lab at STPI Bangalore. What we are required is to take this message every nook and corner of this country, so that all those persons, all those young boys and girls, all those ideators, innovators who wants to access our facility can come forward and access all the facilities that we are to offer through a way of doing things, through a way, through a mechanism which our friends, in our colleagues in STPI Open Lab will put in place and make it popular among the prospective users. I must say that this entire theme, that is connected, ambient, and intelligent, is gels very well with the ongoing development that are happening and the kind of future this IoT sector as such holds. I must again come to the point where I am supposed to launch a open challenge program. But before that, I must say that my colleague Subodh Sachan has detailed about the kind of initiative we are taking to promote overall startup ecosystem in this country, to create a serious movement in this country in all emerging technologies. So we have already decided to create centers of excellence, 25 in number. We have already launched 13 such centers of excellence. And these centers of excellence are very, very professional incubators being led by industry leaders like Sanjeev Keskarji, all the places. I must say that we have already taken on board chief mentors, who are the people. Chief mentor is the person who leads this incubator and takes all the decision. This any center of excellence that we are creating in invariably being led by the industry leader, industry veteran, who is the person who will be accountable, will be the actual leader of this initiative. And therefore, we are affording a much needed industry leadership to the entire initiative that we have put in place. So we have we have so far about 12 chief mentors who are industry leaders who are working with us. We have 85 mentors so far already on board. And we have 84 partners who are working in these 13 COEs that we have already launched. This number has to swell, has to grow. As soon as we will add a few after a few, and finally we'll take it to minimum 25 number. So we have about 9 funding partners, and so far we have about more than 100 startups onboarded in STPI COE ecosystem. So I must say to all those participants who are participating in this IoT Open Challenge program, that you are well connected with the entire ecosystem that is already in place, and it is ever growing. Apart from that, once you are part of our ecosystem, you are also connected with the Ministry of Electronics and IT's Startup Hub. We call it MSH. And MSH is a platform which in turn would connect you to the best practices, best of the mentors, best of the funding, everything that is required, and the ministry will bring from all over the world. So you are very well connected with a great gateway which opens you to the rest of the world. And therefore, you please come and join. With this, I must now launch this IoT Open Challenge program under this auspicious IoT forum, which is being held currently. And we would request and solicit the participation from the prospective young boys and girls, anybody who is having idea about a smart electrical equipment monitoring system for industry or office, automation or healthcare. The objective of IoT Open Challenge is to build, design, to acquire electrical parameters of each individual machine and upload to cloud, and a cloud application give provision to monitor all required parameters and advise user if any predictive maintenance is required. This is the challenge program that we have. Sri Sanjeev Keshkarji has already explained that we have a kind of website where you can come and register. This entire challenge program is open up to 11th January of 2021, and you are always most welcome. We will work with you. And all those people who are participating, they also know, apart from becoming a prospective incubator with us, a prospective startup who can be onboarded, we would also, even if you don't want to onboard with us, we will also offer you free for top 5 selectees screened in the participant, 5 free slots for 3 hours each in IoT Open Lab. And therefore, you know, this IoT Open Lab is not merely a laboratory. It's a very living place where you will get a lot of environment, insight, you will talk, you will be exposed to not only technologies, but the people with wisdom and ideas. They will handhold you, work with you. And therefore, I must solicit, I must invite all of you who are participating and all those where we would always reach to through all those means which we will be having in place, so that you join us and work with us and become larger STPI COE family. I must once again, congratulate STPI Bangalore team, its leader, Sri KT Sudarshan, who is working at STPI Bangalore, and Subodh Sachanji at STPI headquarters, who is actually implementing all these COE initiatives of STPI in his capacity as a Chief Executive Managing Director of STPI Next Initiative. So this is a clear statement of STPI that we are very professional, we are very serious, and we want to become India's largest player in technology startup ecosystem. With this, I must thank TAI, IoT Open Forum, and most importantly, TR Anandji and Sanjeev Keskarji for affording us this opportunity for launching this very challenge program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the keynote address and launch with IoT Open Challenge. With this, we come to the end of this session. I would like to thank our Director General STPI, Dr. Omkar Rai, for being with us today and highlighting about the benefits of IoT lab here at STPI Bangalore and launching the IoT Open Challenge, and for his continued guidance and support towards promoting and creating a startup ecosystem in the country. Thank you, sir. Thank you once again. I would like to thank Sri Sanjeev Keskar, Chief Mentor STPI IoT Open Lab, Sri Shailendra Tyagiji, Director STPI Bengaluru, and Sri Subodh Sachanji, Director STPI Headquarters, and all our partners, organizers, and participants of this session. We urge all startups to take note of this IoT Open Challenge and participate in large numbers and make use of the facilities provided at IoT Lab at STPI Bengaluru. Looking forward to see you at STPI Bengaluru at IoT Open Lab. Thanks everyone, and thank you for being part of this session. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is TR Anand. To all the officers of STPI, please give me 2 minutes to express the vote of thanks from our side. On behalf of TAI Bangalore and the IoT Forum, this is Anand. I am a Governing Council Board member of TAI Bangalore and also the IoT Forum core member. Thank you once again. It's our pleasure, Dr. Rai, and it is our good fortune that you chose the IoTMatrix to launch the Open Challenge. Once again, I want to tell all the participants, January 11th is the last date for you to participate in this challenge. So please go to the STPI site and register. Once again, I would like to thank all the officials of STPI. You have set a clear vision and direction, and also indicated the extent to which the startup ecosystem can utilize the facilities of STPI IoT Open Lab. We will publicize it surely within our IoT Forum. We have the Telegram channel with over 800 users. We have the startup ecosystem directory with over 1,500 entries and active members. So we will give wide publicity to this and encourage it. And on occasions like this, STPI has always been come forward to support us. So thank you for your consistent support, STPI Bangalore, Sri Keskarji, and Director General Dr. Omkar Rai. Once again, I would like to thank all the participants for taking the time, all the STPI participants, and definitely this is for the benefit of all startups. So once again, all the startups who are listening to us, not just from Bangalore, across all India, because we are now a pan-India reach that we have, and therefore we can partner you. So with that, I would like to close the session. And once again, thanks to all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and good day to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. T.R. Anandji.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
I appreciate.
Thank you, sir. Welcome.
Thank you, Sanjeev ji.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Namaskar.
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 Thanks all for joining us. We'll be closing this track, and we can move on to the connected track for the keynote, closing keynote.